Hello, all, and welcome to this week's exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. It's great to talk to you all again. So, we're waiting a little bit for my co host for the evening to get situated and get on the call. But in the meantime, I can kind of run down the top of the show news and things. So, as I am reminded by the chat, if you are seeing this, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell anybody who might need to or want to hear this or participate. Word of mouth is really important. It bumps all the algorithms. So wherever you are consuming this show, whether you're watching it or whether you're getting it as a podcast later on, like, share, subscribe, and spread the word. So top of the show kind of things. We are doing great on paying off Phrasehoff. We are making tremendous progress on that. We are currently at 32.5% paid off, which is awesome, which means we still owe $84,384. Which I have no doubt that we will make happen relatively soon. I appreciate you guys' donations. If you would like to donate and help us, runestone.org/donate. The current figure, if every member paid $113 today, it would be paid off. So that's awesome progress. So thank you guys for your generosity. Svan has just popped in the show for us. People who would like to follow along, please do so at veluspow.org. That's where we do all of our readings from, certainly during the Poetic Edda portion. Come to mention, so our next episode that Svan and I do, we will finish the Poetic Edda. It has been a long journey. It's been well over a year. I don't remember how long, but much longer than a year. So we've been on it for quite a long time. But it's been good, I think. I think I've gotten a lot of nuggets of wisdom out of there that I'm glad I've been able to share with you guys. So that'll be awesome. If you want to go through, like I said, please feel free to read there or any other translation you might have of the material. There's, different translator may have gone a different route, and you might find something expressed in a different way that hits a little bit different. Feel like there's something else to talk about at the top of the program here, but I am not remembering what that might be. Nick is suggesting I plug Disa Thing at Njordshof. That's our Hof in White Springs, Florida, and that's going to be in February. That is their kind of showcase event of the year for the Njordshof district. So anybody who wants to make the journey to White Springs, Florida, I would invite you to do that. It'd be fantastic. I'm going to be in attendance. It's going to be awesome. So come on out if you can. Also, remember, a lot of our program is question and answer based and audience participation. So if you guys have questions, please get those to us, and you can send questions to us anytime you want at vns at runestone.org. That gets them to us, and we will answer them on the very next episode. So that's where we're sitting on that. To get started here, tonight we are going to read the Atlamál hin groenlenzku, and that's the Greenland speaking about Atli. So it's going to be the poem that's believed to be composed in Greenland, which is kind of cool and a little bit different from our other Eddic poems that we've gone through. Svan, what do folks need to know, if anything, that's different on this one? Oh, and I was neglectful. GW Farnsworth, as always, you're amazing. Thank you for your donation. You gave us $45, 20 towards Phrasehoff, and 25 towards this program. So thank you so much, as always. Svan, what do people need to know before we get into the material tonight?
Excuse me. I am recovering from disease. So what you said was actually kind of the thing about Greenland. This story, I mean, it goes all the way back to the 5th century, and the battling between the Burgundians, the Franks, and the Huns, and it was most likely composed in the 10th century to the 12th, but was written down by the 14th. Because remember, Iceland was founded as a nation in the year 1000. So Greenland and the settling of Greenland
at the same time that they rejected troth with our gods.
Yes, and most of Christian Europe was in the throes of the Black Plague. So they were all opining that this was somehow Armageddon. And the Icelanders actually, I would refute that a little bit, Alice. Here you go. They knew that Norway had them in a chokehold, and that if they didn't accept the church from Rome, that they were going to not only suffer in Iceland, but their descendants who had settled Greenland would suffer with embargoes. So when the Haugodi of Iceland at the time made the decision, he went under the cloak, and he said that because the church was so politically powerful and was on the threat of embargoing the island and making their lives miserable, they would go to the church of the God of Rome, really the God of Israel, on Sunday, and then they were free to worship the gods of their ancestors any other day. And that was the initial step. But once the church got its foot in, within 2 generations, they had demonized and outlawed most folk practices, and most of it was done behind the priest's shoulder. And the church went so far as to take the bells from the churches and make it that they somehow keep the Hoodle folk or the Landvatir away, even though bells were already established to be sacred to the land spirits. So you can really see, and there's a lot of connections that they try to make between Hasatan or Satan and Lord Odin, in particular, because he was still influential in the poetic courts of Iceland. So I think it was the start for sure. You were correct, but
so as an official act of their all thing, they officially broke troth with our gods, and the small concession that, well, you guys can kind of worship the gods if you do it in secret, and then on the outside we worship this zombie Jew. Yeah. Betrayal is foul.
Excuse me.
A curse upon anyone who betrays our gods. That's the thing. People ask if we celebrate, all those generations of our ancestors that were Christian, and we do, all but one. There's people who are raised that don't know any better, but there was one generation that knew better, and one generation of people that decided to knowingly forsake troth with our gods, and the ones who knowingly made that decision, I think they likely find themselves on the strand.
Yeah, I agree, honestly, with the disgrace of that level, whatever that generation might be. Certainly around Olaf Tryggvason's time, I would imagine that Tryggvason is somewhere on the strand. But
and it's funny to amend what I said on that generation. It's not one generation for everybody, but it's one generation in people's family. one of the interesting things, and apropos, and this is the thing I was stumbling over at the beginning that I was going to say, we are celebrating for the first time the Day of Remembrance of King Seward tomorrow. And it is his first Remembrance Day. And he was one of the rare instances where his father had converted. And he's like, no, let's roll it back and go back to the trough with our gods. So there's like one conversion period in everybody's family where that family broke with our gods. And that's what I mean by the one generation. That generation in different countries and different places happened at different times. It just officially was codified into law at the year 1000 or year 1000's all thing in Iceland.
Well, and they always the kind of pigeon on a chessboard kind of move, where it's do what your ancestors did best and convert to Christianity. That liberals and Christians like broad stroke history pretty hardcore, and one of the things they fail to mention is that, yes, like you said, the generation that turned, more than likely the generation following that did not, but went back. And I mean, this was all over Christendom.
And that's why we celebrate, and we see that with our heroes very specifically, our Anglo-Saxon kings that we celebrate, because they're some of the few exceptions that went back and reestablished that trough after, it had been broken by their immediate predecessors. And that's a very rare and unique thing. And it's one of the reasons they stand out as heroes. So before we get going into the meat and taters, we've got a couple of questions that I think are just worth getting away up front. And the first is by a 5-year-old from Sweden. And she wants to know, Ida Carolina wants to know, what is the significance of the mushrooms in the Freeshof mural? And you happen to have the man who painted that mural right here with you today. So, Svan, explain.
Ida, it's really nice for you to ask the question. And I'm going to be really honest with you. When I painted the picture, in the bottom, there wasn't anything going on. It was just I had 3 days, and I was trying to focus on the corpus of Holy Frey and the body. And so at the end, the Givia of the Hof said, the bottom looks terrible. Put something down there. And so I like to draw like the flowers, the mushrooms, all of those things. I had the scabbard down there empty, and it is a very stark color there, but there was nothing else there, and I didn't know what to do. So I made what was kind of a gardenia bush, and she said, I want you to put mushrooms in there. She didn't specify which ones. So I, of course, put fly agaric or Aminata muscara, which was used all throughout Europe to get rid of bugs, and also for medicinal purposes and spiritual purposes. But the major reason is to put a splash of color down there to make it look cool.
So, though we recognize legal prohibitions against use of fungus for spiritual purposes, and we would not encourage anybody to violate the laws of the nation or municipality that they live in, a little bit more to it, because I'm a follow up with a question. How come the same mushroom is pictured in the Odin mural?
And also Baldur's mural. So now you're starting to put.
He said you need to fill some space at the bottom.
Now you're making some connective. No, I am. For anybody who doesn't know, I am extremely fascinated with the usage of herbs. The herb charm of Nornernot that we use is my herb charm. I'm fascinated with the usage of lowland, warm climate psilocybic, mushrooms and the mountainous Animata muscara. And I actually went to school for horticulture during my landscaping stint in my life, and was extremely fascinated with ethnobotany. So it's just me putting in splashes of color, but I think so uniquely, the Aminata muscara mushroom is deeply tied to specifically the Slavic, Gallic, and Germanic Aryans. I do not believe Soma is Aminata muscara. I actually believe it's a plant, but that's a whole nother subject. But yes, it's because it just immediately brings magic. Whenever anyone sees the mushroom, there is an immediate transference into the world of mythos. There is the unknowing, the mystery, the bright color, the vitality. It's whimsical but serious at the same time. It's just something. That's the real reason why I did it. I didn't do it.
And honestly, the bright red with the the dotted with the white on it really pops and makes it a really dramatic element to have in compositions. Like, it really pops. We got a couple of other questions, and I think that because while we're on a roll, we'll get those. We're going to read the material. Unlike the past couple of weeks or a couple of Svan episodes, we only have one piece that we're covering tonight. It's a little bit longer, but not oppressively so. So we can answer some of these up front while the people who asked them are still here and engaged. The next two are kind of the same. So red shirts and black ties looks great. Conspired? And what's with the red? So first, caveat, this is green, but it's super dark, and it's darker than it was when I ordered it, but it is green. And I'm wearing red and green because it's almost Yule time, and I've got one episode with you during Yule this year because Brandy's doing the one on 12th night. So the next episode I will, as custom determines, I will wear my like swole Santa sweater.
Yeah.
So I figured this is my closest one to people celebrating Yule this weekend, and I'll wear some festive red and green. There was no conspiracy involved.
Yep.
Svan, is there a reason that you chose to wear red this evening?
This is what I wore to work today. When I get on the podcast, I am wearing what I wear to work. I am a barber. I'm my own boss, so nobody tells me to dress this way. Just wanted to. And it happened to be that the red shirt was closest. You can hear it in my voice. I've been ill for the last week. So I've been kind of trying to catch up at work and get my clients ready for the Yuletide holidays. And it was completely not planned. I didn't even, until I saw the question, it didn't quite hit. Because on my screen, your shirt is very bright red.
It is very bright red in my house as well. Yeah, it is. It's like fire engine red. So the follow-up. So Svan, being a son of Iceland, wanted to cut some slack to some cowardly representatives at the 1,000 all thing, and I wanted to condemn said cowardice, and it brought some question up. So question goes like this. Some surely publicly renounce the gods to stay alive while maintaining their worship of them and passing it down to the next generation. Any leeway for them, you think? So sorry, I've got much to say, but Svan, go ahead and take the first swing at that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I believe that, and I've always kind of made points that Christianity did not spread by the grace of their rabbi or the church, or just because everyone thought it was the bee's knees. No, it was usury, it was manipulation, it was political backlogging. It was, if you want to make allegiances with my kingdom, you're going to marry my daughter, but you have to become a Christian, you have to get baptized. And again, our ancestors had a very loose base of what troth to the gods meant, I think that they had a very unsemitic view of their connection, and that they unfortunately looked at it more like common political of the time politics, and their dedications to jarls and to thanes and other people and lords of the land. And sometimes when it got hard, you would, join the other guy. Excuse me. So I think that Christianity's spreading was very political, and we see the shining exemptions of folk that were like, no, this isn't just some sort of political affiliation with the divine. These are the gods of my people. And I think that was very much a reaction to how Christianity, which had been doing that all the way back since it injected itself into Crete and into Greece, and all the way back to Justinian the Apostate. He actually reconverted back to Hellenistic paganism. Julian, excuse me. He was known for LARPing, and I say this in a good way, though. He was very, very high esteemed at looking at the philosophers of Greece. So he had an unkempt beard. He wore simple togas and things to kind of in like reference to them. But the Christians were just being particularly what they do at the time, and they were trying to defund all the other religions and wanted Constantinople to only be paying them, etc. And it's pretty much had been that way ever since. They're just very, very aggressive. It's very much like Islam. It's very much a part of that. It's like hypersensitive Zoroastrian dualism that they just took it to another level, and they were very, very good at it through the Roman ages. Just like warfare for the Norsemen coming up through the migration period, they learned so many tactics from the Romans that the Norsemen had good hit and run tactics, good weapons, good steel, as people were remigrating back into the north. Christianity was forged in a crucible of politics, and they were really, really good at it. And the common folk, I think, were so distant from the cities. They were so distant from the influence, especially in Norway and in Sweden, that they were just like, oh, okay, that's like something the king is doing. And they were able to, for some generations, avoid it. But somewhere along the way, like Leif Erikson with Eric the Red, Leif Erikson is that generation. You can point it out. You can see him. He converted his mother, which pissed off Eric the Red to no end, because they were having a frosty marriage as it was. And but he loved his wife, and she wanted him to build a little chapel. And so he threw his axe over the berm. And he said, where that axe lands, I'll put that little house to your God. And he was just notoriously like not happy. And he moved to Greenland eventually. So, yeah. I just don't think it's so clean cut.
I think, okay, so I realize that it is two things. First, because I want to just put a cap on the Iceland thing. They weren't under any pressure of anything. There was no, inquisitors or crusader army at the door, or they had no pressure. Well, okay, they had no threat of violence. They had no direct threat of boycott. They had no actual pressure. It was becoming not cool in the community of European nations for you to not be Christian. And so they voted with democracy, which kills a lot of really good things, to officially sever their ties as a nation with our gods. There was nobody with sword in hand. There was nobody threatening them. They are cowards that chose something that was politically expedient and probably economically advantageous. No slack for that.
Man, I'm getting attacked.
Well, build that time machine. Go talk some sense into great grandpappy on that.
Have this the mushroom ring, and I can go through and tell
There
them
you go. There you
this is
go.
a
So,
bad idea.
here's the thing with other people. I understand that saying "I'll be loyal unto death to the gods" is a very, very easy thing to say. It's a much, much harder thing to live. Um, and I think that it's aspirational, and I think we all should be so resolved and make such a declaration. But I think we know that there's a certain degree of folly to that until that's been put to the test. Those of our heroes that we know their names who were put to that test and who stayed loyal to the Aesir, we remember eternally, and we celebrate them yearly with days of remembrance because we appreciate their loyalty and courage and conviction to stand by that. So, if you have some crusader army gonna kill your children or rape your wife or kill you unless you say you convert, I get that. I get doing that as a temporary measure and then, trying to escape the oppression and then go back to your faith. But once we start admitting that that's okay, then everything else becomes okay. And every time it's inconvenient, you just disavow and you can pick it up again later. And I've watched that. I watched that in modern times a lot. There's people that will step away from their faith because they're scared of their family reacting, or they're scared of work reacting in a way, or they're worried about losing a career, or maybe they're worried about somebody calling them a name, or they're worried about their parents looking at them funny, or they're worried about their wife getting mad at them, or they're worried about any number of things. Once we say it's okay, it's okay under the most extreme circumstances to disavow the gods, then you watch that bar slip steadily until it just doesn't matter and it's not a thing anymore. And I'm not willing to do that. So I don't cut that leeway, but I can't tell you, our gods are much better than me. And there may be circumstances, and it matters how you end the race a lot more than stuff that goes on in between. So, if you've got this super secret 4D chess plan that our ancestor had I'll disavow, but then I'll go over here and I'll raise an army to reconquer, and then okay. But we don't see that a lot. What we see a lot is people that straight up go conform, do what's popular, get the reward, and sell out the gods. That's what we saw a lot. Now, in different places, the threat was a lot more visceral and a lot more real. Other places, it was just avarice. It was people wanting to make money and wanting to have political alliance with, the big boys in the Carolingian Europe or in the Mediterranean or wherever. But the other thing is you have this theory that you kind of posit that they're secretly passing it down. And that's this legend that everybody's got this secret hidden paganism they're passing down. I think that there were probably, and I would love to find out, there were probably absolutely some instances where there was an actual plan to go underground and maintain some kind of underground link to the old religion. I don't know for sure of any of that, but I hope that some of that happened. And I always look for that, and I want to find that. And I think that there's little hints of that in stories or in some stuff. And I was actually talking to folk builder Chris Savage earlier today about two of our heroes who were practicing Asatru in the 1400s. So something made it down to them for them to have some ability to connect with our gods in some special way. But yeah, I think that happens less often than we'd think. And Svan made a good point about a lot of our ancestors at this times level of commitment to the gods. A side note, and this isn't to denigrate everyone who lived in the Viking Age, it happens to be the point at which our people had literacy and wrote down the tales of their gods, but it's not the golden age of the practice of Asatru. The practice of our faith goes back as long as our people have existed, and I have every hope and reason to think that it was much more evolved and in a much higher state of cohesion at earlier times and under different economic and climate circumstances than the Viking Age found a lot of our ancestors. The trouble is where we see the material culture of the very tail end, the dying gasps of that original practice of Asatru, a lot of the people are just carrying on a cultural tradition and they're not devout Asatru are. Some are, but it's like in this day and age, every gangster rapper's got a bedazzled Jesus piece and a big old crucifix and whatever. And they may even quote a scripture in their, gangster rap album. It doesn't make them, definitive examples of faithful Christians, but it does echo older traditions. And I think sometimes with some of the more politically advantageous people at this times, you have that. You have people that are culturally Asatru, but are not people of deep faith or deep commitment. And I think you see that a lot of different times. But so that's a kind of case in point. The gods know the truth of it. And yes, if you're somebody that they're going to kill and rape your family if you didn't say the things you needed to say, but then you engendered some kind of rebellion and you pass down secret knowledge to the next generation to do a thing, then they may very well have cut slack on that. That's entirely up to them. But I did want to put it out there because I think it's an interesting question. It's something that people often think about. And I also want to assure everybody, yes, I get that it's way easier said than done, especially when the consequences are not just on you, but on people that you love and care about. I get that. One of the hardest things to reconcile, and a lot of our people in this day and age don't, and they won't have the honesty to do it. The only way you recognize and appreciate the value of courage is by seeing the contrast of cowardice. So we can't only talk about courage and not mention cowardice, or we shortchange courage. We can't only talk about truth and honesty if we don't also call out lies, because that cheapens what it means to be truthful and honest. So I think those things matter. While I've been flapping my gums, Leroy donated $30 towards paying off Phrasehoff. Thank you, Leroy. We appreciate it very much. And Steve bought us a coffee. And I believe coffee's $5 donation. Thank you for that, Steve. We appreciate it. You guys are awesome, as always. Svaner, are you ready to engage in Atlamál hin groenlenzku?
Yes, I was going to say some of the other stuff that needs to be known. In here, you'll hear things like about ship voyages. Most likely, those were land voyages at the time, if this was hearkening back to actual events during the migration period. Or it is simply stylistic. This is how the Greenlanders would know about travel in predominance. And so we also find that there are, I think, mainland European sensibilities of poetics coming and bubbling up into the Nordic period. There was, I believe, a connection of influence from Central and Western Europe into the Nordic lands. Storytellers were constantly picking up new elements and honing their craft. And also, too, what was popular at the time. That's what you wanted to give the people in the entertainment strand of rope of the poetics. So you'll notice that there's a lot of sentimentalism. There is a lot of a lot more expressive emotion over deed that starts to show up in the Greenland poems, as opposed to earlier poems that focused greatly on tangible victory, tangible defeat, etc. So that, I think, there starts to be more of the poetics that we understand. I'm also trying to think, just for a recap for everyone to understand, Sigurd has died, Brunhild is dead, and we have the Gyuki's children. King Gyuki, his children are Gudrun, the last female representative of the Nibelungs. And then we have Gunnar and Hogni. And their youngest brother was killed when he assassinated Sigurd. And so all of this takes place after the fact of Sigurd's death. So this poem mainly focuses around Atli, who is in the east and is, of course, the leader of the Huns, and his taking of Gudrun and the slaying of her brothers. It's all of the aftermath, and we got that a little bit in the poem from the 2 weeks ago. So that's kind of where we are in frame. But again, this brings us to wrapping it up.
Oh, so one sec.
I'm muting
Actually answering a question about next week's show. So I'm coming up. I'm a little bit slow on coming up with a topic for next week because our law speaker just realized that he had some plans. So he will not be able to make Adulting with Alan next week. So I'm figuring out what I'm doing. But something came to mind, and it came to mind on a strange, like one of the history groups or something I'm in on Facebook. There's a guy that was, and this is random, but enjoy the story anyway. It relates to the last topic that we were talking about on this, like, well, what if I secretly do this weak thing, but I'm really doing it to like safeguard some secret hidden knowledge and pass it on to the next generation. And though I think that very seldom happens, it does happen sometimes. So there's this guy that was, and I forget the man's name, and I feel bad for that now. But he was an American POW in Vietnam, and he was at the Hanoi Hilton, and he realized that it was really brutal there, and that his best bet was to play dumb. So he convinced him that he was really low IQ and that he couldn't read and that he was just a dullard and he was a simpleton. So he could have, freedom of movement around the camp and freedom to like sweep up stuff and do little chores because they treated him like he was retarded. So he played retarded and he would sing these dumb songs to himself in this Old MacDonald Had a Farm cadence. But he was doing it to memorize the names and vital information of all the other soldiers that were incarcerated with him at the camp. And so when the VC offered to free him at some point for like a political negotiation, and all the other guys there were like refusing to get let free unless you'd let all the guys go. They told him like, no, take the deal, because then you can go tell all our families and tell the State Department and whatever, like who's here, what they've got, and like the disposition of guards and whatever else. And so that's what that guy did. He, acted simple, and he, took the deal that other guys wouldn't take out of their extreme courage and loyalty. He went ahead and he was the patsy for it so he could go home and convey the intel. So it does happen. That kind of thing happens. It's just not usually how that goes down. It's usually people justifying making excuses for cowardice.
That's another thing about the cowardice and cunning, and the usage of, what that which can't be seen, which is kind of the lesson in the 13th Warrior, which is the adaptation of the Eaters of the Dead. And yeah, there's that sense of feigning weakness in order to draw your enemy into an ambush or to, you know, do that. But that's the thing. That's the risk. Not only do you risk physically losing and everyone remembering, but you also spiritually run the risk of going down in history as, see, he was a coward. And he's like, I was trying to do a thing.
Had a secret plan. This in my life, I have seen a lot of people use flimsy excuse to justify cowardice and immoral behavior. I've seen very few people cunningly do something like that to come back and save the day. So that's why I'm hesitant to cut the slack on that and to you know think that Hamlet's really up to something or whatever. So, all right, Svan, 41 minutes in. Let's start this thing.
Well, and I also wanted to tell people there's lots of cool stuff in here. There's little nuggets, information I think are important from titles and runes and other just little Easter eggs of knowledge that are worth looking at, even if you're not truly and deeply invested in the story. And it's very well written, as all of these later ones really are. I think you and I have both said, wow, like, oh, it's just so good. And it's because I think the uniformity of poetics in Europe was starting to become more collective. And the uniqueness or the, I would even say the kind of bumpiness of older poems, especially when we talk about translations on top of that, is that the translations become a little bit easier, a little bit smoother, and the poetics are kind of becoming more popularized. And it's something a little bit more akin to what we are familiar with. So, right out the gate, again, and we saw this in the other Greenland saga. It's a very quick intro hop on. Excuse me. It is, hey, you guys remember how they did it in the olden days. So we're going to move past that and go right into what we're doing. And that's exactly how the poem starts. There are many who know how of old did men in council gather. Little good did they get, in secret they plotted. It was sore for them later, and for Gyuki's son, whose trust they deceived. So, in essence, this is Atli's ultimate. He's gunning for the sons of Gyuki, Gudrun, her brothers, and in specifics, Gunnar and Hogni. And Gunnar is the widower of Brynhild. So just to kind of constantly, I'm just trying to water to make sure that everyone's in the same page. Fate grew for the princes, to death they were given. Ill counsel was Atli's, though keenness he had. He felled his staunch bulwark, his own sorrow fashioned. Soon a message he sent that his kinsmen should seek him. Wise was the woman, she, fain, would use wisdom. She saw well what meant all they said in secret. From her heart it was hid how help she might render. The sea they should sail, while herself should go not. And this, of course, is referring to Gudrun. So it's Gudrun and Atli. It's very, very, they're kind of satelliting the subject. But malice is deep in her heart for Atli. This is even before she marries him. And we also see this kind of heavy dripping of drama. There's this kind of plot building to it that you don't usually see in some of the older poems. And another interesting thing is the usage of simply speaking about the runes is coming up. And I think that's very interesting. Excuse me. considering the Greenlanders and Iceland and the usage of the runes by that time. So she said, "You should go and sail, and I will not go." And she, in 4 runes did she fashion, but false Vingi made them. The speeder of hatred ere to give them he sought. Then soon fared the warriors whom Atli had sent, and to Limafjordr came to the home of the kings. So one of the other things interesting is that the fjord is probably not, it's an addition, it's a later addition. But the making false of the runes, the messenger is Vingi. So she writes in runes, and then Vingi, the messenger of Atli, sabotages the runes. Most likely she's, again, sending these to her brother. Same with when she sends the ring with the wolf hair wrapped in it. So here's direct evidence of forging, adding perhaps extra limbs to the runic message, and it is being used in a writing sense. They were kindly with ale and fires they kindled. They thought not to craft from the guests who had come. The gifts did they take, and that the noble one gave them. On the pillars they hung them. No fear did they harbor. So at this point, we're really talking about the arrival of the Burgundians and the Uitlanders in Atli's court. Actually, let me see. It says here, the poem may really have thought that the kingdom of the Burgundians was in Jutland or Denmark, or the poet may have taken a well-known name for the sake of vividness. So we can see a great amount of a lot of this moving around. Place names. By the time of Greenland, it wasn't necessarily intended at all to be historical. And people like this place, so we're gonna just, because it's a cool name, so we'll make it that they go there. So forth did Kostbera, the wife of Hogni, of the 2 brothers, then come. Full kindly she was, and she welcomed them both. And glad too was Glaumvor, the wife of Gunnar. She knew well to care and for the needs of the guests. So this shows a healthy house. The queen, the lady of the house, is takes care of those who come in of high renown. She's not feeding just the lowly soldiers, but as the host itself of these soldiers, the highest ones are being taken care of by Hawkins' wife. I failed to mention this, but previously, the actual in stanza 3, it's Horsk var husfreya, and they are referring to a woman. The Freya means lady, and of course, Hus is house, so it's the lady of the house. We had kind of a funny story at Freyshof. I went ranting on and on and on about how I will generally say like Lord Odin and Lord Thor, but I will say Holy Frey because Frey means Lord. And so very much like how it bugs me that people say tuna fish, but not salmon fish, or I just, it's sad because the people that were on the workday while I was painting got some irate dissertation as to why tuna fish is redundant. So Holy Frey is the proper way to say it instead of Lord.
Lord Frey is fine. It's absolutely fine. Don't listen to this. Don't listen to this, folks.
I mean, I'm not going to get mad at you.
No, but here's okay. So this is I don't know why we are injecting this at this stage in our reading, but that's how we do here on Victory Never Sleeps. So I was talking, and this also spawned from a conversation at the dedication. There are a lot of right ways to do things. The wrong way to do things is either intentionally doing something bad or it's just being willfully stupid. Intention is so critical to everything we do. And I would extend that to all aspects of life. I mean, obviously, there's time where you're just screwing around or, something completely simple. But when we do something, especially in terms of our faith, intention means everything. Now, people can express the same intention in a variety of ways. The thing is, when asked, hey, you're doing this different, why are you doing that? You should have an answer. And you might go about something really different. And that's kind of a thing that we see on Victory Never Sleeps. Svan and I will come at a question or at a passage or at something, sometimes from very different angles. But we usually wind up either in the same place or in a very complementary place. Rune work or anything else. Sometimes if Svan and I were to both do a rune pull about a specific subject, we may pull different runes, but our efficacy is on how close our independent answers would come to matching in a correct way. And you can get there from a lot of different avenues. When you're doing something ritually, there's a lot of right ways to do it. Outside of just obviously not trying, the wrong way to do something is just because. Just because, why not? You should have a reason why you're doing it. You should have a reason why you're saying the things you're saying. I like to say Lord Frey because I put Lord as an honorific title in front of our deities as a way of showing respect. I realize that, like, if somebody asks, hey, you know what Frey means? Well, yes, I do, because I'm not dumb and I think about the things. So thinking about stuff matters. As long as you're doing it on purpose, that's one thing, but don't accidentally do it. And it merges into a Matt bouncing anecdote. Told the guys that I would bounce with, I don't mind if you get us into a fight. I do mind if you accidentally stumble into a fight that I have to pull you out of. If you want to go pick a fight, cool. I got your back. I'm game. Let's go. But don't stumble into one you don't see coming because you're not aware of your surroundings or the effects of what you do. If you're doing it on purpose, okay, then I get it. But don't make it something on accident. So there you go. Back to the story.
Okay. So, she attends to the needs of all the guests. Then Hogni they asked if more eager he were. Full clear was the guile, if on guard they had been. Then Gunnar made promise, if Hogni would go, and Hogni made answer as the other counseled. Then the famed ones brought mead, and fair was the feast, full many were their horns, till the men had drunk deep. Then the mates were made ready, and their beds for resting. So everyone feasts, and then the bed chambers, which were generally long, closeted, sliding door separation or partitions, were set, and everyone goes to bed. Wise was Kostabera, and cunning in runecraft. The letters she would read by the light of the fire, but full quickly her tongue to her palate clave. So strange did they seem that their meaning she saw not. So they've been messed with, and she's trying to decipher them, and she's confused as to what's trying to be said. Full soon then in his bed came Hogni to seek. Now there's a gap in that the line is lost. The clear-souled one dreamed, and her dream she kept not. To the warrior the wise one spake when she wakened. So here we see again the poetic usage of prophetic dreams. Very, very big common element in Icelandic and Greenland poetry. And still, I think, a significant thing in our faith to this day. Anybody that is familiar with Jungian concepts of dreams and symbology, and this very subject is the thing that me and my apprentice for the Gothar program were talking about just yesterday. So she immediately speaks, and she says, "Thou wouldst go hence, Hogni, but heed my counsel. Known to few are the runes, and put off thy faring. I have read now the runes that thy sister wrote, and this time the bright one did not bid thee to come." So the bright one is his sister, for anybody wondering. And it's surmised that even though she doesn't understand exactly what's being said because the runes were tampered with, this is a bad omen. She has a bad feeling. She has a bad dream. Don't do this, is ultimately what she's saying. And full much do I wonder, nor well can I see why the woman wise so wildly hath written. But to me it seems that the meaning beneath is that both shall be slain if soon ye shall go. But one rune she missed, or else others have marred it. So there's the key. She just knows something is wrong. She knows that Gudrun has the wisdom to write in runic, but these runes don't make any sense. So either she missed something, or it was marred. And another dutiful point to note with this is that it is the wives who are communicating in runic. I think a lot of oversimplification in the current climate or current internet climate is that somehow runes are specifically masculine and are focused around. I don't like some people kind of come up with this idea that there's like a Gothi or Vitki kind of underground, and that women were mainly somehow focused on Seidr. That's not the case, and we have actual archaeological proof that women often used messaging to message their husbands, and a lot of these were mundane, even though they're using the smaller, younger Futhark. But I just find it very interesting, and this isn't meant to pique eyebrows. It's just that these two women have been taught how to write runic in Old Norse, and they're the ones kind of relaying the messages. But Hogni speaks because Hogni ultimately, he's not as fearsome as their youngest brother, but he is no pushover. He just says what any warrior would say. All women are fearful. Not do I so feel. Ill I seek not to find, till soon I must avenge it. So I'm not seeking any trouble, and trouble won't find me unless I'm looking for it, or by that time I will be ready. The king now will give us the glow ruddy gold. I like that little glow ruddy guliraiva, excuse me, glow drauður. The body of it is just shining. And so he says, women fear too much. You're reading into this, and it doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. I'm going to go forward and make these allegiances with Atli and get the money, the gold for our kingdom. When Costabera speaks, she says, and remember, they're husband and wife, and this is in their bed, their laying chamber, when they're kind of speaking to each other. In danger ye fear, if forth you go thither. No welcome and friendly this time shall you find. For I dreamed now, Hogni, and not while I hide. Full evil thy faring, if rightly I fear. Thy bed covering I saw in flames burning, and the fire burst high through the walls of my home. Excuse me. So she saw him on fire in his bedding. And then Hogni speaks. Yon garment of linen lies little of worth. It will soon be burned, so thou sawest the bed cover. So, it doesn't matter that you saw it. He's basically saying, if you saw it in a dream, doesn't mean that it's true, but it doesn't matter either way. He will not avert from the course or the fate upon which he must go. And she speaks again. A bear I saw enter. The pillars he broke, the pillars of the hall. And he brandished his claws, so that craven we were, filled with fear. With his mouth seized he many. Not was our might, and loud was the tumult. Not little it was. I think it's very important, and I'm sure you can also expand on this, Asatru, the kingliness connection between the bear and Atli. The lion and the post-Christian conversion and the subversion of the bear as the royal animal, a kingly animal, was planned. It was very much so. But here we have a very raw, clean-cut usage of what the bear represents. It is the king, and his vengeance will be mighty against the Nibelungs.
The lion is the bear, but with a little hat and the little side curlies.
Excuse me. It's the main. Yes, I mean, and again, of course, to the Lion of Judah, and the connection is clearly there in relation to the pageantry of the Middle East plays and bleeds up and bubbles up through Christianity.
And joking aside, lions are cool. Like,
yes.
Were I a Hebrew gentleman, I think a lion is an exciting symbol of stuff. Lions are cool. They're just, it's not our stuff. Unless we're talking about, strange cave, Paleolithic lions in a nice age setting. But yeah, that's really cool. And this is a time to plug a book that I often plug, but then I remember the long drawn out name of the title. What is it? Bear the Forgotten King. I will look for the title, but it was a really interesting thing that I read that Steve McNallen brought to my attention years ago that I thought was a neat book. And it's just something that you run into material you wouldn't run into otherwise, but it was kind of an understood across, a pan-Aryan context, was this idea of the bear as relates to regality.
Yeah, I think it's that the kind of unknown cultural tenets that perhaps get lost, just like with Ostra and the rabbit and the egg. We know it, it's there, it's always been there, it can't be taken away, but yet there are other things that were taken away, and the bear is a perfect example of it.
For anyone interested, the title is The Bear, History of a Fallen King. It's a cool looking book. It's got a dramatic heraldic bear on the cover. I'm trying to fill you with words while I see about an author here because I didn't have my stuff on point.
Michael Asatru.
Nick's got it before me. Good for you.
It's already up on screen, sir.
Nick, you are amazing. I appreciate you. That's awesome. Everybody go out, buy this book, give it a read. It is interesting.
It's like the third time you've mentioned it. It's on my Amazon wish list. I had it handy.
Well, it's one of those ones that we come back to because, there's certain things that until you know they're a thing, they don't stand out. And this is one of the ones that since I read this book, every time there's like a bear mentioned, my head immediately goes to it because it's kind of the place where I first learned about it and a just kind of a mental touchstone on that.
Oh, I wanted to bring up somebody asked a great question. Langolish said, "What about the Nemean lion in Hercules?" And bear in mind, one of the things is that symbology there is not in relation to Hercules being a king, but that he is a slayer of monsters. The Nemean lion was absolutely a monster that was birthed by a monster, a two-headed dog, a chimeric abomination. So there's this kind of essence, and I think the bigger point would be that he was such a massive figure that it not even a regular lion could cover him. It had to be an aberrant lion. I can't remember the name of the father or the mother, but I definitely remember it being that it was born of a mythical beast. And that was kind of a huge thing of it. But yes, I mean, lions were in Europe, cats were in Europe. That's kind of a strange thing that we kind of got into this, but.
Well, it's funny because, yeah, sorta. I mean, it's and it's interesting you bring it out because you do find, okay, as we do on VNS, bear with us. We'll get through this. We're already a little ways through it. We'll absolutely get it tonight. But these points are interesting. So the lion is a rare thing. So yeah, in Greece, you'll find the lion. In Persia, you'll find a lion. In areas where Aryan people migrated to, at the fringes of the migration, you'll find different animals. But the bear was something that in our homeland and in most of the core Aryan lands where our people were was a point of commonality. And you see its significance because it's in, of such a variety of Aryan cultures. And it makes it to Aryan cultures that don't have bears. Like it makes it to, islands that long since have depopulated their bear supply. It makes it to places where it's clearly a memory from an earlier time, which is special in that. But also, your point about the lion, yes, it is completely appropriate and should be expected that when our people have hofs different places and do different cultural things different places, that the animals and birds and sea life in those areas get brought into our lexicon of things that we use as symbols or that we use as kinphilia of things. We talked about hofs and well, what happens if we get a hof in South Africa? Cool, we could absolutely have elephant heads on the gables if we wanted to. It'd be strange, but it's interesting to consider that when our people move and colonize and conquer different places, incorporating the natural world of those spots into our stories, into our reference point of heraldry and sacred imagery and things is important. And you see that in a slow march in ancient times when the movement was over the course of generations and not in one person's lifetime.
Also, I did want to say one thing too is all of the tasks in which Hercules fights these beings, it's chthonic. They are all, it is really about the catalyst god fighting earthly forces. Mm-hmm. And there's some people on the internet who think that Lord Thor just simply goes into the underworld every day to judge folks or what have you. But, when we look with observation and keen eyes, we see that the Lord of heaven and earth very rarely is in sequence with the world below. Instead, he's in direct opposition because he is of life, of vitality. He's of mastery of chaos. He's of warding chaos from the edges. So you see it when with him pulling the boar, him taking Cerberus. You see it with the Lion of Nemea. It really is about him just mastering the forces of the chthonic and the earthly and the semi, or just beyond the material. So that was a cool segue, though. I'm not. I hope you didn't take that in any way, but Langolish, that was a great little.
No, that's awesome, and that I like these shows where we get on the topics and kind of go explore different things that maybe we don't talk about often. Before we get back into it, Nick from Ohio just donated $10 towards Sigerham and $10 towards Frasehoff. So thank you for that. We appreciate it, Nick. And Svan, carry on.
All right. So she's telling him, "Don't go. There's death. There's calamity coming. I've seen it." Hogni then speaks back. He says, "Now a storm is brewing, and wild it grows swiftly. A dream of an ice bear means a gale from the east." Now that's an interesting line. First off, the word fita or white is not the word ice. But this is a direct reference via the Greenlanders of a polar bear. And this little nugget here is that our ancestors who were settling in Greenland picked this up. Now, maybe it was something from the Inuit, or maybe it was something that they had formulated on their own, but there are not white bears in Iceland, and I do not believe there were at the time. I'm almost 99% sure. But they may have crossed occasionally via the ice. But here he says it, the dream of a white bear, even though the translation is ice bear, means a gale or a storm from the east. And it could very well likely just be the fact that where the Greenlanders settled, which was on the southern tip and southwest of Greenland, or the southwestern side of Greenland. The capital Nuuk is in the southwest. That with eastern winds coming off the mountains, the snow and probably the low visibility is something that the predatory polar bears utilized to their advantage. So when it came off the mountain, you had to be extra, frosty so that you didn't get got by a big, giant white bear.
That's just while you were doing it, I was looking up, it's if you have polar bear in Norway, it's at island chains that are technically owned by Norway, but that are significantly off the coast. I mean, our people could have in far northern portions of Russia, there's spots, but they are, there's healthy population in and around Greenland. And that's an interesting, their familiarity with the polar bear is going to be much, much more. If they hadn't seen them, I can only imagine folks that hadn't encountering that in Greenland. It's terrifying spectacle to behold.
Yeah, and you think about Bjarki during Hrolf Kraki's saga, and the mention of him in his Fylkja is a bear. It's a brown bear, most likely. And then you have maybe some people in the great north and in Finland. Assuredly, there's bear. They still eat bear there. On my trip over to Japan, we stopped off in Finland, and there was a whole thing about them being bear eaters. But a lot of the folks that moved to Iceland were from southern Norway and southern Sweden and the islands in between. So probably not a lot going on there. So you have these generations settling in Iceland, and then a 2 or 3 later, they go to Greenland, and it's like, wow, there's nothing here. And of course, Leif Erikson, who I'm not a fan of, said, he's going to lie and say it's beautiful and green and try to convince people to come over there. And I can just imagine them running into polar bears, but I think with spears and they're the steel with iron and weapons, they probably faced off with these behemoths. But yeah, still unbelievable. Couldn't imagine it. You go from like a black bear, brown bear to the polar bear.
Well, and the behavior is so different. So again, silly segue or whatever, but growing up in Alaska, it was something I was aware of. And again, I was in southern Alaska. There weren't like polar bears where I was at a lot. I did go up to Nome, and I was north of the Arctic Circle a couple of times, but they're predatory. You don't stumble on one, you don't hunt one, you don't accidentally encounter one, and then you guys kind of figure it out. They're hunting you. They're actively hunting you, and they get like 10 feet tall. They just get massive and huge, and they're intent on just eating any meat they find, including and especially people. I remember the gym one time. This guy was trying to recruit me to go up to the North Slope and be a polar bear sniper. Like, that's a job they have at the oil fields up there, is for guys to post up and like telescope watch to see if there's polar bear approaching where guys are working up there, because they will predate on that's a good source of meat. Thank you. My wife has prepared for me some deviled eggs, and I'm excited. But yeah, so back to our story, and it's a good and interesting time that we segued into. As our folk go to different places, you encounter. You know what? I'm going to harp on that a little bit more too, because I think it's important. There is an important connection, and we hear this. We hear about the connection between blood and soil a lot. I think specifically a hyper emphasis on that comes in the early 20th century nationalism, but the idea of being connected to the land and the spirits of the land has always been with our folk. But I think what's important to remember is it is simultaneously stagnant and dynamic. Yes, it remains in a place, and the people that hunker down and spend the rest of their existence in a particular valley or in a particular area can nurture that in that place in a really special way. But it's something that our folk have always been very adept at adapting and building anew when they find themselves in new and distant lands. Most of the area that we think of as sacred land of our folk is not indigenous to our folk. It was a place that our folk migrated to and settled and spent, sometimes they settled there for thousands of years, sometimes for hundreds of years, sometimes for decades, sometimes less. Every sacred site you find that is sacred through venerable centuries of worship there, every one of those had a year one where this is brand new and they're just setting it up. So there's absolutely a connection between blood and soil that way, but you can build and foster that wherever our people find ourselves. Our people, it is very easy to see things in a binary that there's this or there's that. Our people are very good at both on a lot of things. We're good at hunkering down and building centuries of establishment in one area, but we are markedly good at conquering new lands, at exploring new frontiers and new boundaries, and building sacred space and, that blood soil connection in different places and in different lands. And I think that's one of the things we run into, the beauty of both of those things when we talk to Europeans. I know we have some Swedes listening tonight. And that's kind of an interesting contrast between Americans who've, our people have been here, and it all depends on the American, but some of us have had people here founding stock of the United States, myself, but there's other people whose families haven't been here that long. But to have the folks that have explored or conquered and gone out to different parts of the world, then interacting with those whose ancestors, stayed and fortified and built the things there in that location, it's an interesting thing, and I think it affects our outlooks on stuff a little bit. It's important to acknowledge both of those currents within our folk. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to mute myself because the cough that comes in, I don't want it to be too much of a thing, especially if anybody's wearing headphones. But there's another mention here of spirit of royalty, and that's one that we're all, I think, can agree on. And there's very little room to ruminate on is the eagle. But more importantly, is in this stanza, there's a mentioning of the hamr, not the fylgja, in relation to the spiritual presence of a king. And it also mentions hugur, or thought, but in this case, it's more of intent, of desire, of the mind. So she says, she returns because he says there's a gale that's going to be coming from the east. And again, Atli is in the east. Costabera then speaks, and she says, an eagle I saw flying from the end through the house. Our fate must be bad, for with blood he sprinkled us. Then there's a break in the stanza. Always just kind of crappy to have that. And he says, or then she says, from the evil I fear that 'twas Atli's spirit. So, in that part, Huda ek av heitum at vairi hamr atla. Hamr, it's his outer spirit, or perhaps his intention. And this may show some variation. We know that fylgja is feminine and hamr is a masculine word. And so that perhaps this is, again, a symbolic representation of his machinations, not necessarily his spirit, and that his spirit may be the bear, or that they both represent his conspiratorial ambushing. But it's just interesting to think about and look at. But it is clearly a literary or poetic plot device to say that when you have a dream and you see an animal and there's, some gnarly stuff happening, this may very well be the spirit or the shape of the soul of someone. And they are sprinkled with blood from the flying of the eagle into the house. Hogni speaks. They will slaughter soon, and so blood do we see. Often oxen it means, when the eagles one dreams. True is Atli's heart, whatever thou dreamest. Then silent they were, and not further they said. So they don't really come to any conclusion. I think this last part is really referencing to Hogni saying, no, he's banking on Atli's good intentions. That there really is no reason to further on this feud. And they are thoroughly under his banner. But we obviously know different, especially with all the other stories already that we have covered. But I digress. So, and I'm now noticing, for a lot of folks who don't know this, there's not a huge amount of prep work that we do. We roll into this just as much with everyone else, and there's a lot missing from this poem. So there's gaps. There's gaps literally in the works as far as concept and meaning, but not physically in the poems themselves. It was almost as if the person writing the poem either didn't know or it was tangibly a mistake. And I think that happened quite often through some of our the Eddas, and that there were some mix-ups sometime. So got to be kind of, mindful of that. Then the high-born ones wakened, and like speech they had. Then did Glaumvor tell how in terror she dreamed. So now Glaumvor is having terrible dreams. And then there's a break and a mention of Gunnar and 2 roads they should go. Now that's really choppy. But in essence, I'm surmising just by the observation is that the dream is interpreted that they have a fork in the road in which they either go forth or they do not. And if they go forth, doom is to meet them. Then she says, a gallows saw I made ready. Thou didst go there to thy hanging. Thy flesh serpents ate, and yet living I found thee. The gods' doom descended. Now say what is boded. So at this point, what we have is that we know that the mention of Gunnar being put into the pit of snakes or vipers, or being hung above, and then in another version he fights to his death. But what we do have here is the idea, the god's doom is descended. The term here, that gerdisk rock rokna, is that the doom, or really what doom means, is the inevitable judgment or the inevitable culmination of all the deeds before it, coming together in the great clash or conflict. And they're not talking about Ragnarok. In this case, that the gods' doom descended. I think that I'm interpreting this as that it's the doom or the judgment of the gods is now laid upon Gunnar and Hogni. I don't know. I find that very interesting. But it's one of the times where you see Rock and Ragna used, but not in the sense that most everybody would be familiar with it. Stanza 23 is completely gone. So Gunnar says a retort, but it's missing. Then Glaumvor retorts, and she says, a sword drawn bloody from thy garments I saw. Such a dream is hard to a husband to tell. A spear stood methought, through thy body thrust, and at the head and feet the wolves were howling. So, again, the symbology of the wolf, the bearer of death, of hunger, of the machinations and of intrigue, and ultimately conspiracy, baying at his death, waiting for the flesh as he is impaled with a spear. And then Gunnar speaks. The hounds are running. Loud their barking is heard. Often hounds' clamor follows the flying of spears. So he's chalking this up to the inevitability. It doesn't matter what my fate is. You're having a dream. The dream is scary, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to avert my way from what I intend to do. I do find it very, very cool that he says the hound's clamor follows the flying of spears. And my immediate thought is, wow, we never think about that. What if there was the usage of war dogs in combat? Or at least by that time, it was an understood concept. And, both sides having dogs, after throwing spears at the opposing side, letting dogs go in to just kind of break the line. I find that very interesting if that's the case. A lot of people will say, I see them on TikTok and I see them on Instagram, and they'll say, oh, the Vikings didn't do this, or the Vikings didn't do that. And they're going off of the absence of mention. But again, we see poetics are so tightly choreographted into a very, very tight space. It's a choke point of you're only getting the very visceral things of poetry. Again, people would think that our ancestors wouldn't know what an owl was. It's only mentioned once in all of the corpus of our poems. And it's not even mentioned as an animal, it's the beak of the animal that's mentioned. So it's really hard, I think, for people to create these arguments where they say, oh, well, that's kind of ridiculous because, it wasn't written down, so our ancestors didn't do it. And that's kind of wild to me. I saw this with the Vikings didn't have tattoos because the only person who wrote about it was Ibn Fadlan, and he was talking about one group of people. And even though it could have been paint or it could have been tattoos, we don't know. So therefore, probably wasn't a thing. And that's a big assumption to say, and I think that's disingenuous. So, we see these little nuggets, and I think that's why this poem is important. It gives us an idea about dream interpretation, about the usage and mechanics of words, especially about components of the spirit. Talks about symbology, the bear, the eagle, the wolf, and just the body being impaled on a spear, and in the darkness of the dream, the wolves are howling. Very, very cool stuff. So Glumvar then speaks back because he said, oftentimes there are dogs that follow the volley of spears. She says in 26, a river the length of the hall saw I run. Full swiftly it roared, over the benches it swept. Over the feet did it break of ye brothers twain. So she sees a river torrent come into the hall, and it flows over and separates the brothers of Gunnar and Hogni, who both die at Atli's hall. Again, very, very cool imagery. The liminal space, the transition. The river is a place between two foundational places, and she's speaking between life and death. Gunnar then speaks, and this is lost. It says here down at the bottom, this interpretation or verse is missing, and most of the editors either assume a gap or construct two Malharter lines out of the Volsunga Saga poem. They bring it over here to keep its continuation going. But in this case, Bello said, no, this is just the nature of the poem that survived. So he moves forward. So Gunnar is, we lose that verse. Glaumvor then speaks. I dreamed that by night came dead women hither. Sad were their garments. So they wore garments of mourning. And thee were they seeking. They bade thee come swiftly forth to their benches, and nothing, methinks, could the Norns avail thee. So now I think we were directly referencing Disir. This is also in Njal Saga, where there are women clad in white and women clad in black. Again, these colorations as symbols of good and evil were not often used pre-Christian, so we're starting to see some of these influences. But they are the Disir of his line. And not even the Norns, the big Norns, the ones at the tree in heaven, that are where all of fate and all of time and all of reality is flowing from in the first well, the highest well. They cannot change what is to come. And then Gunnar speaks, too late is thy speaking, for so it is settled. From the faring I turn not, and going is fixed, though likely it is that our lives shall be short. I think that ultimately this is determinational philosophy that was popularized amongst the warrior ethos, and is another reason why I talk about how knighthood is a Germanic component brought to Christianity. It did not exist in the Bible. There was components of suffering or enduring things, but the union of warriors that were transfixed into destiny, moving forward, facing and not veering away from the grand design of the world and of their fate. That is very Germanic. And here's a perfect example of it where he just says, it doesn't matter the dream. It doesn't matter if we are going to die. I will not avert from what must be done. Also, bear in mind, this poem is clearly has the benefit of being latter composed in relation to all the other stories that tell the fate as it is. So this is more a demonstration of poetics. So he says, then bright shone, or sorry, not hey, he doesn't say this. He says, though we'll go, even though our lives may be cut short. Then bright shone the morning. The men all were ready, they said, and yet each would the other hold back. 5 were the warriors, and their followers all, but twice as many. Their minds knew not wisdom. Sniver and Solar. And they were the sons of Hogni. Hogni's 2 sons. Orkney was he called, who came with the others. Blythe was the shield tree, the brother of Costabera. That's the shield tree, the Skjelder, because it doesn't say tree here. It says the shield bearer. Blythe var bor Skjelder brother. Blythe was the shield tree. I think in essence the Bellows is using a kenning. A shield tree is a warrior. So Blythe was the warrior, the brother of Costabera, that was going as well. So the fair decked ones, the warriors bright, followed till the fjord divided them. Full hard did they plead, but the others would not hear it. Then did Glaumvor speak forth, the wife of Gunnar. To Vingi she said, the messenger from Atli. That which wise to her seemed. I know not if well thou requitest our welcome. Full ill was thy coming, if ever shall follow. Then did Vingi swear, and full glib was his speech. Then that line is gone. So, the built up and the loss. But he says at the end, there's 2 lines. He says, may giants, may Jotnar now take me, if lies I have told ye, and gallows if hostile thought I had towards you all. So he says, curse me if I've come here falsely. But we know he did, because he messed with the runes. So I think just poetically, story-wise, he's an Iago style character. He's just very, very not to be trusted. And I think this is more or less just a very curt word of warning that despite what people may say, their intentions may still be. He, in the end, ultimately has to deal with Atli if he fails this mission. So getting them there so that Atli can kill them is probably high on his priority list. So then the Lady Bera spake forth, and fair was her thought. There is another gap. May ye sail now happy and victory have. To fair is as I bid ye, may not your way bar. So she gives them a blessing of their travels, that they may not find any obstructions. And she says, Sigli ver seiler, or Sigur Aurnir, go forth happy and with victory. or sail thee with happiness and victory. And victory have. So, in 35, then Hogni made answer, dear held he his kin. Take courage, ye wise ones, whatsoever may come, though many may speak, yet it is evil oft mighty, and words avail little to lead one homeward. They tenderly looked till each turned on his way, and then, with changing fate, where their farings divided. I think ultimately what we see here is not a story about Hogni and Gunnar, but a relatable story about the Greenlanders or the Norsemen and how the potence of omen and the trepidations of people leaving and possibly never coming back. You see a generality of theme here that I think is very interesting, because I can only imagine this is being spoken because it's been experienced by the audience numerous times. So, full stoutly they rode. Bear in mind, this poem speaking in nautical sense, but most likely, or truth be told, in the previous poems, they were all moving by land unless they were moving up a river. So, full stoutly they rode, and the keel clove asunder. Their backs strained at the oars. Their strength was fierce. The oar loops were burst. The thole pins were broken. Nor the ship made they fast, ere from her they fared. Again, just poetic language of the straining and the power as they move. No, not long was it after, the end must I tell, that the home they beheld, that Boothly once had, Boothly is Atli's father, loud the gates resounded, when Hogni smote them open. Vingi spake within a word that were better unsaid. Go ye far from the house, for false it is in entrance. Soon shall I burn you, ye are swiftly smitten. I bade ye come fairly, but falsely was under. Now bide ye afar while your gallows I fashion. So there is the truth revealed of the cunning of the messenger Vingi, who in this case and in one of the other poems is the slayer of Hogni, but is not always named until some of the later poems. Then Hogni made answer, his heart yielded little, and nor did he fear that his fate held in store. Seek not to affright us. Thou shalt seldom succeed. If thy words are more, then the worse grows thy fate. And remember, Gunnar has presented his brother's heart, first a false heart by Vingi. And he says, that's not my brother's heart because it flutters in weakness and cowardice. And then they bring out his real heart, and he says, yes, that's my brother's heart because it's bold and full. And so Vingi really, I think, if this was to be converted perhaps into a told story, Vingi is absolutely this just kind of shadowy, backstabbing worker from Atli. And I would actually like to look into him more to see if he was one of Atli's one of the Huns, or if he was working for him, but clearly a dastardly figure. Then Vingi they did smite, and they sent him to hell. With their axes they clove him, while the death rattle came. So, again, the usage of the word hell is written by Bellows in the classic Western sense, but in the Old Norse, it is she, hell, but specifically the aspect of death. They sent him on hell's road. They sent him through death. Helldraupu. And then Atli summoned his men. In mail coats they hastened. Already they came, and between was the courtyard. Then came thy to words, and full wrathful they were. He speaks. Long since did we plan how soon we might slay you. Hogni then retorts, little it matters, if long ye had planned it, for unarmed do we wait, and one have we felled. We smote him to hell, of our host was he once. We killed your guy. We killed your boy. It doesn't matter if you've been planning this and all this conspiracy. In essence, he's saying the flexes, the fate of any conspirator against us is the same, is death. Then wild was their anger when all heard his words. Their fingers were swift on the bowstrings to seize. Full sharply they shot, by their shields were they guarded. In the house came the word, how the heroes without fought in front of the hall. They heard a thrall tell it. So, denoting that of Gunnar and Hogni's host, it was a slave that survived the battle to come back and speak of the great tumult between them. Grim then was Gudrun, the grief when she heard with necklaces fair, and she flung them all from her. Silver she hurled, so the rings burst asunder. So she rips off her necklace, and then out she went. She flung open the doors, all fearless she went, and the guests did she welcome. To the Niflungs she went, her last greeting it was, and in her speech truth was clear, and much would she speak. She says, for your safety I sought, that at home ye should stay. So I told you to stay. But again, Vingi messed with the message. None escapes his fate, so ye hither must fare. Full wisely she spoke, if yet peace they might win. But to naught would they hearken, and no, said they all. So she tried to quell the battle between her brothers and Atli. And they all said no, doesn't matter. Then the highborn one saw that hard was their battle. In fierceness of heart, she flung off her mantle. Her naked sword grasped she, her kin's lives to guard. Not gentle her hands in the hewing of the battle. So in this version, Gudrun goes into the battle to protect her brothers. And she has a bloody hand. I think this is important when we talk about like Eric's saga and Lever and his daughter, Eric's daughter, and she's fighting off the Skrælingr or the Native Americans. There is a lot of usage of women kind of getting into the battles by this end time. And I think it's worth noting there's a reason for that. Most people are like, badass girl boss. No, frontier. It was, you were on the edges of known society. And it was clear a theme that even the ladies might have to swing a sword in relation to the doomed fate of those around them. So it's very similar to circling the wagons. This isn't a note of where it was just like, yeah, this is common. No, this is clearly showing you are on the edges of a stable society, considering all the warfare. Then the daughter of Gjuki, Gudrun, 2 warriors she smote down. Atli's brother she slew, and forth then they bore him. So fiercely she fought, that his feet she clove off. She cut his feet off. Now, this I think is the only mention of Gudrun going into the warrior sense. She was always kind of compared to Brynhild, where Brynhild was scary. Gudrun was a lady. So this is the first time she's being portrayed as a scary force. In the previous poem, she doesn't get involved with the battle, and she ends up killing Atli later, after killing his 2 sons. But this again double emphasizes her devotion to her family. She says, grim then was Gudrun, the grief when she heard, with necklaces fair, she flung them all. Oh, excuse me. I backed up from there. Wait a minute. Did I get mixed up? Excuse me. Let's see. I jumped back, I think. Yeah, she clove his feet off. Another she smote, so that never he stood. To hell did she send him. Her hands trembled never. Full wide was the fame of the battle they fought. 'Twas the greatest of deeds of the sons of Gjuki. Men say that the Nivlungs, the Mistwalkers, the Mistfolk, while themselves they were living, with their swords fought mightily. Mail coats they sundered. Helms did they hew. At their hearts were fearless. All morning they fought until midday shone. All the dusk as well and the dawning of the day. When the battle was ended, the field flowed with blood. Ere they fell, 18 of their foemen were slain by 2 sons of Bera and her brother as well. I like to point out that that's actually pretty accurate in the sense of these small war bands, 20 folk against 20 folk, was more probably a commonality. And one of the ways that you can really kind of ascertain that is like, how many boats did it take for them to get there? There's 3 boats. That's under 50 people. So, but here they fought all day and into the night and into the dawn.
It's an interesting thing to bring that up. That's one of the, when you read the Nibelungenlied, it's always, these massive armies, and it's on a scale that's very elevated. In the more Scandinavian sources in the story, it's very often, and I think a lot of the time that was the case in the North, rather than, thousands or tens of thousands of people arrayed on a battlefield, it was, small war bands meeting up with other small war bands in, close quartered handful of people there context. You notice that a lot in the sagas, to where, it's just a handful of guys on a raid or doing a thing versus another handful of someone's retainers. It's very rare that you have like a pitched battle with hundreds or more people involved.
Excuse me. Oh, I just saw something as well here, because again, the mention of it, he says, then the warrior spoke. This is, of course, Attila. And he says, wild with his anger, this is evil to see that thy doing is all. Once we were 30, we thanes, keen for battle. Now 11 are left, and great is our lack. I mean, that's just an interesting concept to understand, is that there was 30 of them, and now there's 11. So they're mentioning, but there was something here that in 55, there were 5 of us brothers when Boothly we lost. So Atli says that King Boothly had 5 sons, and he's the only one that's ever mentioned. But he retorts saying, now Hell has half of them. And Hell is capitalized, so this is clearly in reference to the Austvanir that harbors the souls of the dead. And it also points into the fact, we say this often, battle does not indicate elevation. Lord Odin is the decider of this. In this sense, he's saying, 5 sons did Boothly have, and half of them are dead. 2 smitten lie here. So it's sad for Atli in the poem, but I wanted to look it up, and Attila's brothers He apparently had an older brother who jointly ruled the Hunnic Empire in 434. But then Attila murdered him. So this is the actual historical Attila, becoming the sole ruler and the feared scourge of God who terrorized the Roman Empire. So that I think is interesting. Apparently, unless there is reference to perhaps brothers by oath, there is no mention.
So an additional kind of point, it's watching this cycle, because it's not a historical accounting. You deal with a lot of people that lived at different times from one another in the same period. This is a fictional work, but it's composed with the echoes of history in it over a long period of time. And it's interesting to watch the translation into local things that make sense, into local power structure understanding, into local scale of combat. It's funny because the Huns were known to be these hordes of people. It wasn't 11 guys, certainly not around like Attila, but brought into this very rural colonial Scandinavian setting, it becomes much smaller. So I think that there is an understanding by a lot of people that this is an issue of the Nibelungenlied portrays things in a high medieval context, whereas this portrays things in some kind of an earlier, more primitive context. It's not about time per se. The Nibelungenlied dates from the same time within 100 years of the Volsunga saga, but it's much more of a cultural, what does this look like in central Germany versus what does this look like in Norway or in Denmark, or in specifically to this in Greenland by this time that they're writing it. The scale and the way that you would display armies and confrontation and princeliness looks different in each of those contexts.
Yeah, and I was just, while you were speaking, I was looking up like descriptors of Attila and his family. He did rule with his brother and then slayed his brother to take control, and that they did for time have tutelage under their uncle, and that there are no actual physical accounts of Attila, even in the historical sense. Only Jordanes has a secondary account, and scholars, of course, immediately, oh, he's a Turk, oh, he's Asiatic, and then others are like, well, he could be Scythian. So, but yeah, it's even the historical is sparse. So again, he's speaking, even if we were to take this completely out of historical context, which I think we should in general sense, is that he's speaking of the loss of his brothers. And this is, again, why is it being said? It's to show the overwhelming devastation and loss and kind of the presence that Gunnar and Hogni have at the end of their life, which they don't really get a lot of that, except, when it's giant bombastic armies going at each other. But I just find it interesting. Hogni then speaks after Atli speaks. He says, "A great kinship had I. The truth may I hide not. From a wife bringing slaughter, small joy could I win. We lay seldom together since to me thou wast given. Now my kin are all gone. Of my gold am I robbed. Nay, and worse, thou didst send my sister to hell." This is interesting. The idea that this the manuscript marks this line as beginning in a new stanza. It is impossible, because perhaps more of it was lost. The meaning of this is half line is somewhat doubtful, but apparently Atli refers to Sigurd's treasure which was supposedly or rightfully his. And that Brynhild, of course, is his sister that he's referring to in saying that he blames the death of his sister being slain, Brynhild, on Gunnar and Hogni. But it doesn't make a lot of sense because right before it, it's Hogni speaks. But it would be more likely or better lent to the idea that this is Atli speaking. Because then in the next stanza, Hogni's sister speaks, so she's not dead. So it's a little confusing. She speaks and says, "Hear me now, Atli, the first evil was thine. My mother didst thou take, and for gold didst murder her. My sister's daughter thou didst starve in a prison. A jest does it seem that thy sorrow thou tellest, and good do I find it that grief to thee comes." So again, this reemphasizes the titling at the top of the 56, Hogni speaks, is probably incorrect. That is Atli speaking. And he is saying, I came with great kinship. You slayed my sister and robbed me of the joy of life. And Gudrun then retorts. And so, Gudrun is mighty spicy in this poem. And then Atli speaks again. He says, "Go now, ye warriors, and make the greater the grief of the woman so fair. For fain would I see it. So fierce be thy warring, that Gudrun shall weep. I would gladly behold her happiness lost." And again, this doesn't fit very well with the other stories because Gudrun doesn't separate from Atli here. Her brothers are slain, and then she conspires and kills him later. But there's this deep resentment between the two of them in this poem. Then Atli speaks, or "Seize that ye now Hogni, and with knives shall ye hew him. His heart shall ye cut out. This haste ye do to do, and grim-hearted Gunnar shall we bind on the gallows. Swift shall we do it, to the serpents now cast him." Again, this is the fate of the brothers reemphasized. Hogni speaks, "Do now as thou wilt, for glad I await it. Brave shalt you find me, I have faced worse before. We held thee at bay while whole we were fighting. Now with wounds we are spent. So thy will canst thou work." Again, I don't care if you're coming to kill me. I don't care if you're coming to hang my brother and cut my heart out. Come and do it. Then did Beatty speak. Beatty is not mentioned in anywhere else in this story. So who Beatty is, down in the notes, it says Beatty is not mentioned anywhere. In the Atlakvida version of this, it doesn't mention Beatty. And in the Volsunga saga, the advice to cut out Hjalli's heart instead of Hogni is given by an unnamed counselor of Atli, who could possibly be Beatty. So, again, just an addition that we can't quite explain. Then did Beatty speak. He was Atli's steward. "Let us seize now Hjalli, and Hogni spare we. Let us fell the sluggard. He is fit for death. He has lived too long, and lazy men call him." So remember the part where Gunnar sees the heart and of Hjalli and says, "That's not my brother's heart." That's what this is referring to. And then I love this. This is kind of a slanderous term towards a man. Afraid was the pot watcher. So a coal chewer or a pot watcher was a man who found himself more comfortable in the house at the kitchen instead of out in the field or at war. So he was a sheltered man. He was afraid. Afraid was the pot watcher. He fled here and yon, and crazed with terror. "Don't kill me, don't kill me." Um, I'm getting Skyrim vibes right now. If you know, you know. He climbed into the corners. Ill for me is this fighting, if I pay for your fierceness. And sad is the day to die, leaving my swine, my pigs, and all the fair victuals that of old did I have. And if he got that horse, he would have been halfway to Hammerfell. But they seized Boothly's cook, and they came with their knife. The frightened thrall howled, ere the edge did he feel. He was willing, he cried, to dung well the courtyard. So he crapped his pants, is what that's saying. To the dung well the courtyard. Do the basest of work, if spare him they would. Full happy were Hjalli, if his life he might have. Then fain was Hogni. There are few would do this, to beg for the slave, that safe hence he should go. I would find it far better this knife play to feel. Why must we all hark to this howling any longer? So stop effing with the slave and come at me. Then the brave one they seized. To the warriors bold, no chance was left to delay his fate any longer. But loud did Hogni laugh. All the sons of day heard him. So valiant he was, that well he could suffer. So, unlike the cowardly thrall, he laughs as they slice him. Then a harp, again, this is mentioned in the other stories, a harp, Gunnar seizes up. With his toes, he smotes the harp. So well did he strike that the women all wept, and the men, when clear they heard it, lamented. Full noble was his song. The rafters burst asunder. This line here, too, just really does kind of remind me of Gaulish poetics in the strange usage of the harp and the physical bursting asunder of the rafters by his the power of his poetics. Then the heroes died ere the day was yet come. Their fame did they leave, ever lofty to live. Full mighty seemed Atli, as over them he stood. The wise one he blamed, and his words reproached her. It is morning, Gudrun, now thy dear ones dost miss. But the blame is part thine, and that thus it has chanced. And Gudrun speaks, thou art joyous, Atli, for the evil thou tellest. But sorrow is thine, if thou mightiest all see. Thy heritage heavy here, I can tell thee. Sorrow never thou losest, unless I shall die. Not free of guilt am I, says Atli. A way shall I find, that is better by far. Oft the fairest we shunned. With slaves I console thee, with gems fair to see, and with silver snow white, as thyself thou shalt choose. So he's saying, I've killed your brothers, but, and I wonder if this is a kind of a hidden insult, is that you are easily consoled by physical things. You will soon forget this. Then Gudrun spoke, no hope shall this give me. Thy gifts I shall take not. Requital I spurned when my sorrows were smaller. Once grim did I see, but now greater my grimness. There was naught seemed too hard while Hogni was living. Our childhood did we have in a single house. We played many a game in the grove where we did grow. Then did Grimhild give us gold necklaces. Thou shalt never make amends for my brother's murder, nor ever shalt thou win me to think it was well. But the fierceness of men rules the fate of women. The tree top bows low if bereft of it leaves. The tree bends over if the roots are cleft underneath it. Now mayest thou, Atli, over all things here rule. Like a rootless tree, a fallen, she's your ruin, the ruin of your kingdom upon you. Full heedless the warrior was that he trusted her. So clear was her guile, if on guard he had been. But crafty was Gudrun. With cunning she spoke. Her glance she made pleasant. With 2 shields she played. So the poem clearly indicates that Gudrun is speaking more forcefully, more grievously. But the reality is, ultimately what is played out in the other poems, is that she tricks him and she kills his sons and then kills him. The beginning of the stanza, the 2 shields, Gudrun conceals her hostility, symbolized by a red shield, which is spoken of in Helga Kvida Hundingsbana, but by a show of friendliness with a white shield. So this symbology of, and I wonder too if it accounts for the both sides of the shield, but in essence, she shows friendship, but that is she's feigning it. Deeply she holds resentment. Red is the color of that resentment, whereas white is the color of peace. The beer then she sought for her brother's death feast, and at a feast Atli made for his followers dead. So he mourns his followers, but there's also the feast of her brothers. No more did they speak. The mead was made ready. Soon the men were gathered with mighty uproar. Thus bitterly planned she, and Buthli's race she threatened. So the Huns, she conspires their destruction. A terrible vengeance on her husband would she take. The little ones, she called, on a block she laid them. Afraid were the proud ones, but the tears did not fall, for their mother's arms went they, asked what she would. Nay, ask me no more. You both shall I murder, for long have I wished your lives to steal from you. And the boys spoke, slay thy boys as thou wilt, for no one may bar it. Short the angry one's peace, if all that shall do. So, again, there's this kind of re-emphasizing of a firmament of fate. We cannot stop you. But they were young warriors, unafraid. Then in 79, it says, then the grim one slew both of the brothers, young. Full hard was her deed. When their heads she smote off. Fain or away was Atli to know whither now what was going on. The boys from their sport, from nowhere he spied them. So he was unaware of their death. And then Gudrun speaks, my fate shall I seek, all to Atli saying, the daughter of Grimhild, the deed from thee hides not. No joy thou hast, Atli, if all thou shalt hear. Great sorrows did wake when my brothers thou slewest. And we know that this is not historically accurate at all in any way. So this is, again, more of a reflection of the commentary of society in the late Nordic period and how the murdering of the children is seen as just this, her revenge or wanting revenge for the ending of her line is so great that slaying her forced husband and forced children, she wanted it. She wanted the blood. She wanted him to see it.
So this is, I think, an important kind of thing to point out. A lot of people, good night, baby. Oh wow, awesome. So a lot of people are very shocked, and rightly so, when we see a mother murdering her children. And, I think that's not lost on the audience this poem was intended for at the time either. This is gruesome and horrific and not, like an awesome thing. This is meant to be terrifying and shocking. And, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned is a thing. Like, women get real nasty real quick on it. But it also points out something. And I wouldn't want And I say this as a father, like I wouldn't want us to forego the modern sentimentality placed from parents towards children. I think that's a really important thing. It's a very hardwired thing, and it's very, it's very much something that's in keeping with the AFA's values, but something that is also important and that this balances a little bit when we look at the cultural context. Our devotion to kinship in modern times very much flows down one directionally to where it is 100% parent to children. In our ancestors' time, it wasn't that way. There was a lot of fealty towards sibling and towards parents and towards grandparents. The directionality wasn't this, the only thing that's important is the children or the future. There was an at least equally important burden to do honor to your parents, to do honor to the line that you came from, to do honor to your brothers and your sisters and your, those in a lateral sense in your family line. So the relationship and the obligation towards family was much more balanced out directionally. And like I said, like I wouldn't take anything away from your devotion to your children, but that doesn't preclude you having devotion to your parents and to your brothers and sisters and to the other members of your family. And I think, the atomized world that we live in now sees that as very strange as opposed to a delicate balancing act. And it was much more of a balance to our ancestors than it is to us.
She then speaks. This, of course, is the morning after the deed. I have seldom slept since the hour they were slain. Baleful were my threats. Now I bid thee recall them. Thou didst say it was morning. Too well I remember. Now is evening come, and this question thou askest. Now both of thy sons thou hast lost, as thou never shouldst do. The skulls of thy boys, though as beer cups didst have, and the draught that I made thee was mixed with their blood. I cut out their hearts on a spit, I cooked them. I came to thee with them, and the calf's flesh I called them. Alone didst thou eat them, nor any didst leave. Thou didst greedily bite, and thy teeth were busy. So this, again, too, is another huge component, I think, of the drama of poetics. The idea of eating. I can't remember exactly right off the top of my head. There is the story of the folks eating their kinsmen or eating their fellow warriors. I believe an easterly king utilizing language and the lack of knowledge ends up feeding them one of their kinsmen or men. This is again a theme, the drinking of the skulls. All of this is just, I really do believe is like, whoa, everybody in the hall, I think, would have a visceral reaction to all of this. But it overly emphasizes every single figure becomes the condensed version of their kind of theme. And Gudrun's is that she was meek, and then she was quiet, and then she was unwilling or unwitting, and now she is fully witting, fully a swinger of swords. She is now come into her own as an instrument of death, just like Brynhild was. Or perhaps I dare say worse. Of thy sons now thou knowest, few suffer more sorrow. My guilt have I told, fame it never shall give me. And Atli spoke, and she just, again, right there, I did not kill them out of fame. She knows that it's going to be looked at badly, but it doesn't matter. He slayed her brothers. Atli spoke, Grim wast thou, Gudrun, in so grievous a deed, my draught with the blood of thy boys to mingle. Thou hast slain thine own kin, because these are her children as well. But she doesn't consider them that because, again, she's betrothed under Atli by conquest of war. Most ill it seemed thee, and little for me twixt my sorrows thou leavest. Gudrun speaks, still more would I seek to slay thee myself. Enough ill comes seldom to such as thou art. Thou didst folly of old such that no one shall find in the whole world of men a match for such madness. Now this that of late we learned hast thou added, great evil hast grasped, and thine own death feast made. I think that the visceral anger that Gudrun is speaking towards Atli is an echoing of the historical Attila and the tribal Germanics' hatred for him and the woe that bereft he brought through Europe, especially amongst the Gutans. So I think that's some of this. I think Gudrun kind of represents that in a way. Atli speaks, with fire shall they burn thee, and first shall they stone thee. So then hast thou earned what thou ever hast sought for. Gudrun then speaks. It also makes point to this. This is a clear designation of the influence of Christianity. The stoning of a woman. That's never been mentioned in any of the poems. And again, I did say it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But Bellows is of the mindset too that that it's a fairly clear indication of the influence of Christianity in the late Nordic period. Excuse me. So he says they're going to burn you, but before they burn you, they're going to stone you to death. Gudrun speaks, such woes for thyself shalt thou say in the morning, for a finer death to another light fare. Together they sat in full grim with their thoughts, unfriendly their words and no joy either found. In Niflung grew hatred. Great plans did he have. To Gudrun his anger against Atli was told. So, Hogni had a son whose name was Niflung with an H. And this is just an indicator of kind of their tribal name as well, the Niflungs. So, but in reference is Hogni's son. So Hogni's son, Hogni was cut, his heart was removed. Hogni's son Niflung, through great hatred, great plans did he have. To Gudrun his anger against Atli was told. To her heart came ever the fate of Hogni. She told him 'twere well if he vengeance should win. So was Atli slain. 'Twas not slow to await. Hogni's son slew him, and Gudrun herself. So in this poem, it's not Gudrun that alone kills Atli. It is Gudrun and Hogni's son that ambush him. Then the warrior spake, as from slumber he had awakened. Soon he knew for his wounds would the bandage do not. Now the truth shalt thou say, who has slain Boothly's son? Full sore I am smitten, nor hope can I see. That, of course, is Atli speaking, saying that you have grievously wounded me so much that bandages will not save me. Gudrun then speaks. Never her deed from thee hides the daughter of Grimhild. I own to the guilt that is the ending of thy life, and the son of Hogni 'tis so thy wounds bleed. Atli says, to murder hast thou fared, though foul it must seem. I'll thy friend to betray, who trusted thee well. Not glad went I hence, thy hand to seek, Gudrun. So in this poetics, the story is, there's the poetic side of the story where everything is aired for the audience to hear and see, but he is clearly referencing the idea that no, it wasn't clear that she was cunning, she was hiding, and then instant betrayal, kills the sons, then Hogni's son and her go, knives out. He says to her as well, in thy widowhood feigned, but haughty men found thee. My belief did not lie, as now we have learned. I brought thee home hither, and a host of men with us. Most noble was all, when of old we journeyed. Great honor did we have of heroes full worthy. Of cattle we had plenty, and greatly we proposed. Mighty was our wealth, and many received it. To the famed one as a bride gift, I gave jewels fair. I gave 30 slaves, and handmaidens 7. There was honor in such gifts, yet the silver was greater. So in a way, this is kind of a, despite all I gave you, you betrayed me. You couldn't let go the dealings of what warriors do. Your brothers fought me and died. Couldn't let it go. I gave you slaves. I gave you handmaidens. I gave you silver. And still it didn't cool your lust for revenge. And he says further, but all to thee was as if naught it worth. While the land lay before thee, that boothly my father had left me. Thou in secret didst thou work. So the treasure I won not, my mother full oft to sit weeping didst make. No wedded joy found I in the fullness of heart. Gudrun says, thou liest now, Atli. Thou little I heed it. If I seldom was kindly, full cruel was thou. So you're not just a giver of riches to me. You were cruel all along. There's no surprise that this was coming. Full cruel wast thou. Ye brothers fought young. Quarrels brought you to battle, and half went to hell of the sons of thy house, and all was destroyed that should ever had done good. My 2 brothers and I were bold in our thoughts. From the land we went forth. With Sigurd we fared. Full swiftly we sailed, each one steering his ship. For our fate sought wherever till we came to the east. So you're the dastardly one, and the Nibelungs rode alongside the great Sigurd, and we were, everything was a-okay, which of course we know is not true. So this is kind of just a back and forth of poetics. And by this time, especially in Greenland, I wonder if the entirety of the story would be known by the audience. So they might not know that this is all kind of not quite true. She said, but we found doom in the east when we came here. First the king did we slay, then the land we seized. The princes did us service, for such was their fear. From the forest we called them, we fain would have guiltless, and rich made we many, who of all were bereft. Slain was the Hun king. Soon happiness vanished. In her grief the widow, so young, sat weeping. Yet worse seemed the sorrow to seek Atli's house. A hero was my husband, and hard was his loss. I really think that this is, again, just the ending, the drop of all that has come to pass. Children slain, brothers slain, Atli slain. Just all this death and murder drops with Gudrun. And she says, from the thing thou camest never. For thus have we heard, having won in thy quarrels of warriors smitten, full yielding thou wast, never firm was thy will, in silence did suffer. Atli says, thou liest now, Gudrun, but little of good will it bring to either for all we have lost. But Gudrun, yet once, be thou kindly of will, for the honor of both, when forth I am home. She then says, a ship will I buy, and a bright-hued coffin. I will wax well the shroud, to wind round thy body, for all will I care, as if dear were we ever. So it's this kind of like strange turn. There is the concept that he deserved it, the murder was there, it was all done, but she will, in the last bit of grace, afford him a goodly burial by boat, as if she did love him. Then did Atli die, and his heirs' grief doubled. The high-born one did, as to him she had promised. Then sought Gudrun the wise to go to her death, but for days did she wait, and 'twas long ere she died. Full happy shall he be, who such offspring has, or children so gallant as Gjuki begot, forever shall live in the lands far and wide, their valor heroic, wherever men may hear it. So there's this animosity towards Atli through all of these stories. And then again, too, the devotion of Gunnar, Hogni, and Gudrun, despite all of the conspiracy against Sigurd, there's this redemption tale in these later poems. And I think this is, again, the forest, losing the forest despite the trees, that ultimately the original poems are lost in their meanings, and that the overarching meaning is connection to clan, connection to siblings, and just the devotion to revenge. And we know well into the Christian overtake of the Norse, blood feuds were still very much a thing. So I think this is just kind of the signs of the times. That which was lauded was that if people wronged your kin, you went to the ends of the earth to get them back.
Well, and the other that is very important in this is the constant, like, super tragedy fear of our ancestors is the strife amongst kin, where the vengeance thing isn't clear. It's like Gudrun, to do the nuclear option deal, she's becoming a kinslayer to avenge her kin knowingly, and she realizes that there's no way out from that. If they're not, you can hold a lot of malice in your heart, and you can do a lot when the enemy is external. But when it's strife within a family or amongst kin, or to where there's mixed relations, there's not a way out of that. It's like anything you do only deepens the hole. And I think that our ancestors understood the conundrum that was, and the evil that's wrought by it. That's kind of a theme in this saga, and we see this now. We see it earlier in the time of Sigurd and Sinfjotli. We see similar mother killing children motif that is gross. And I think that, some people, when they encounter it for the first time, it's very shocking. I think it's intended to be shocking for the original audience. But it is this like singular burning lust for vengeance that women are able to embody in a much fiercer way. And I don't think we always see that, but I think the times that we do see it, you see it in a particularly shocking and over the top manner. That's a very unique female capacity. But yeah, I'm glad we made it through that this evening. We have four more poems to read next time Svan and I are with you, and that will bring us to the end of the Poetic Edda. But we have a couple of questions that have been generated. Svan has left the building for a moment, but that's fine. We can start. The first one here is easy, but I do think it's important. By Stephen. Is it okay to leave a donation to the AFA as an offering to one of the gods, such as instead of buying an apple or beer and leaving it as an offering under a tree to Odin, I instead tell Odin I will give a monetary donation to the AFA as his offering, hail the gods. So yes, absolutely. More than just kind of absolutely, I would say that every one of your donations to the AFA is an act of worship and an act of offering to the Aesir. So I think, yes, the answer is resoundingly yes, but there's options on it too. So I think that a general gift to the Asatru Folk Assembly in the name of one of the gods, as an offering to them, is absolutely appropriate. I also think that you have, with the various things that we are raising money for and the various Hoffs and the various, projects, a way to specifically put it towards, something you feel particularly drawn to in a way of honoring one of our gods. So absolutely. And I don't just think it's, kind of an okay option. I think it's a very good option, because I think that the intention in an offering in a donation to the AFA is the same as the intention you would put in a beer or an apple, as you said, but in a very tangible way that can be put to use to further the mission of the Aesir, to bring our folk back into trough with them, and can provide things to elevate them, such as Hoffs and stuff that way. So I think it's a really, really good option, and something I would encourage everybody to do. Our other question that we've got here tonight is, good evening, Alsheri Gothi, Matt, Witan Svan, Folk Builder Nick. We often hear a criticism from Christians to people like us that Christianity is essential to the building of European civilization, and returning back to our foundational religion is absconding everything post-conversion. That Christian values allowed Europe to develop out of barbarism, and our civilization will just devolve without them. Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that they are talking about Northern Europe and not the ancient Greeks or the Roman civilization. What would your retort be? Thank you for all that you do. Svan, do you want to take the first swing at that?
Sure. I would say that it's again a broad stroke and ridiculous notion to think that Christianity somehow made Europeans European. And I think that would denote deeply the undercurrents of a lot of European Christians who are actually anti-European, when you look at the details, when they flip through the pages and they see the things that they don't like and that are staunchly European, they hate them because they are so adherent to a lot of these kind of Semitic ideas. I will say this much, though. Christianity was the encapsulation or the banner, the shell that allowed Europe to organize to beat off to a great success the Ottomans or the East. But it was not the entirety of that which kept the Easterners out of Europe. There was a lot of political sense. There was geographical reasons. Obviously, it didn't work in Spain, but for so long. It's a broad stroke sense. Like after the fact, it's like, oh, the reason why the Ottomans were kept out was because of Sky Rabbi. Is basically what they're saying. There was a great need for unification, and perhaps that unification did come from the very act of like the Crusades. But the Crusades themselves were not built on Christian principles. They were built on Germanic and European warrior ethic. I think that it's also foolhardy for them to say that with how much they're unwilling to admit, like how Greek philosophers influenced early Christianity, or how very dastardly they were in their techniques and in becoming a state-recognized religion, where they could finally rub elbows with the big boys at the big boy table of the Eastern Empire. The pagans were getting money from the ruling class and the emperor, and they wanted it too, and they were willing to do anything to do it. And this even went all across the empire, from Alexandria to Constantinople and eventually to Rome. Perhaps there was a much more subtle positivity point, because I don't want to be so negative. One of the things that Christianity did was emphasize the unification through writing. Writing is something that I think our ancestors should have picked up sooner, but they were, again, the warrior culture built on oracular speech is so tied and tight and is very Aryan in its genesis, that if they had picked that up sooner. But again, you have these scholars, these people who are lamenting about the things that happened in the Middle East, and they want power in the present day empire. They were scholars. The Christianity was run as a kind of a scholarly death cult from its inception by Saul of Tarsus, all the way to the Viking period, and even further so. But it did eventually unite people, mainly under money, under linguistics, and under politics. Did that make it strong enough to fight off against the Ottomans? I believe that there were levels of that, but it was also the Germanic fighting spirit, warrior classes, knighthood, ethos, and all of the things that made Europeans European and was clearly not based in Christianity. That also helped, I'm going to say it, galvanize Europe against the the encroaching outsiders. But I digress. I think they're just, again, pigeons on a chessboard. They're going to broadly say these things, and they've never done anything wrong, and everything has always just been because their God, Yahweh, God of the Israelites, is awesome. And that's not the case. It's history isn't black and white. And so, in essence, they're very reminiscent to the same people that were, the Civil War was about slavery. Oh, well, your ancestors converted to Christianity because reasons. None of that is true. It's much, much more dynamic than that. Oh, you're muted.
So Svan hit on a number of things. I will always be grateful to the Jehovah's Witnesses because their approach to Christianity is to make it the church that Jesus taught and not all of the things that in the West had a cross on it. And that's a really big difference. Medieval Christianity has nothing to do with Jesus, and it has nothing to do with peaceful desert Jews that renounce the world. One of the things that's interesting, so for an example, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't perfect, but their attempt to clean slate, let's go back to the scriptures and try to do Christianity in the most authentic way that is the teachings of Jesus. I think you see that with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I think you see that with like the Amish. I think you see that with some of these people that are directly not what would have made Europe awesome and that are lame. Jesus was about renouncing the world, being no part of it, being no part of its governance. The whole world is in the power of the wicked one. The world is literally Satan's. And that's why Satan could offer Jesus, when he tempted him in the desert, could offer him, all of the kingdoms of the earth. That's a big Christian tenet of the early church, was like, no, we don't want to be part of governance or the military or any of the things that shape the world. We're aloof from the world. We live in the world, but we're no part of it. Well, what about my taxes? Should I give my taxes? Well, whose face is on your coin? Render unto Caesar what's Caesar's. It was a removal from worldly affairs. Yes, the Roman Catholic Church was a big benefit to Europe in the sense that it unified all of the disparate tribes of Europe into one faith. And that unity made Europe stronger and able to do things. That has nothing to do with Christianity. It has everything to do with, Roman imperial efficiency and the militant folk soul of the Germanic people. It has everything to do with that. It has nothing to do with a rabbi in Judea. And that's a really important difference. Yes, with a cross stamped on it, European culture did a lot of great things. You could have stamped a lot of different things on that were much more authentic, and the same impulses would have happened. Those impulses were from the European Aryan folk soul and not from the Semitic religiosity of Judea. But there's lessons to be learned. Yes, a strong, unified religious body for a religion is very important to exist in the world that we live in, and to have influence to unite people under faith and spirituality is very important. I think that we would have avoided a lot of the pitfalls with a much more honest version of that, which would be Asatru, or something very, very close to our understanding of Asatru in a modern sense. Unifying with one church, and that's why we talk about the AFA being the church of the Aesir, unifying with one body, with one voice towards a goal. That was very important. That did all of those things. Sky Rabbi didn't defeat the Ottomans. Winged Hussars and unified response from warrior nobility from Europe did that. All of those people were very much in contrast to the peaceful, world-rejecting religion that Jesus taught, but were absolutely in the greatest traditions of warrior kings of Asatru. Medieval and Renaissance flourishing in Europe is very uniquely non-Christian, even though it was done with a heavy power structure of Roman Catholicism. But all of that has this ingrained war with itself because it's not being authentically Christian. And as soon as people became aware of that, you have all of the disintegration of Europe that occurred with the Reformation and people after that. I don't think that the teachings of the Christianity that these people want to talk about, flourishing Western civilization, that's inauthentic and kind of a slap in the face to their desert God. All of those things would have and should have occurred in pursuit of troth to the Aesir, with different pictures on the stained glass and, hammers on the banners of crusaders and warriors of Europe doing things. And, instead of focusing on the Levant, focusing on Europe and stopping Muslim invasions and all of the other things that were done in medieval Europe. But without the rot and the internal dialogue of knowing that what was being done was in conflict with the Christianity, there was a guilt that came with the Christian overlay of European warrior tradition. I think our people would have and would still be flourishing in a much greater way if that built-in guilt and built-in war with ourself wasn't there. I think we would have gotten a even more robust flourishing of European civilization that would still be in effect today and not be in retreat. And you see the forces, you see all of the seeds of Western civilization's current regression within that Christian construct of a destruction of familial bonds, a rejection of racial difference, a rejection of manly virtue, a rejection of loyalty to kin, the rejection of pride and of dignity. Most of the virtues you see in medieval Christianity are things that are rejected explicitly by Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount, but things that were fundamental. And I know for sake of argument, we weren't supposed to reference Greece and Rome, but were fundamental to like Roman imperial virtues, and were fundamental to the understanding of medieval European warrior aristocracy. But all of those things are antithetical to, the rabbi that preached, "Blessed are the meek." The meek shall inherit the earth. The least will become greatest. The proto-communism of first century Christianity has nothing in common with the flourishing of medieval and Renaissance Europe. And it's hard. I get that people that don't have the context and don't look into it far enough, there was a cross stamped on everything in that time. And so, that must be very Christian, but it's a very, very thin coat of paint over a very, very different soul. You're muted.
May I also say, too, Christianity created an avenue for which it could readily pull from the virtuous pagan. The actual concept of the virtuous pagan is mentioned in the Bible in Romans by Saul of Tarsus. And he says, as many have sinned without law shall also perish without law, and as many have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. Of course, the law is the rabbinical law, or the covenant with Yahweh via the Israelites or the Jews. For not the hearers of the law are just before God. So those who don't know it, the pagans, will go before him. That's a very interesting point I want to bring up. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by thy nature the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves. So he gives credence that in order for us to pull from these greats that have influenced us so much without it being seen as, hypocritical, is because they're acting in accordance with rabbinical law, even though they don't know the law. And this, includes Homer. It includes Hector, and other great pre-Christian. And I think this was Saul kind of recognizing the room. He was reading the room. But more importantly, this also shows something that we see in Judaism now, is the judgment day at the end, in which all the bodies of those who have passed will rise up to be judged. So kind of like waiting in the ground. And Saul, who everyone calls Paul, is a Jew. He's saying that even though the pagans don't know the law, the rabbinical law of the Jews, there will come a time when their God, Yahweh, stands to judge everyone, and they will rise from the grave, and at the court with Yahweh and Jesus, they will be allowed in. Because he said, which through their work and law was written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts and meaning, while accused are else excusing one another, in the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus, according to my gospel. So he is saying that the early conceptualization of judgment is, again, very much like the Judaic concept of this kind of, again, the waiting of the soul, and then the judgment shall be had, and everyone will be put into their proper place. And even some pagans will be allowed to sit at the foot of Yahweh. Very, very interesting. I never knew about this till recently. So
that's what they do, though. That's a thing. Saul of Tarsus was a real interesting, marketer, and he's, the apostle to the Gentiles, they like to say. He got that you had to open it up and make all these concessions and try to market it to Europe, who weren't going to accept the Jewry of early Christianity. You had to make it something completely different. And I think the inauthenticity of that gets expounded upon a lot in the Middle Ages, and popes write explicitly, especially in the Christianization of England, like, don't change the stuff, alter it as little as possible, carry on all their pagan customs, just slap a cross and put Jesus on it, and it's all good. And I think we see a lot of that. So yeah, the thing that people think is Christianity, if they read their Bibles and actually were fair about evaluating it, is not Christian at all. It's like when you realize all of the things about Christmas that are awesome are Yule traditions, you're left with a very much less fun holiday. Most of us are warm and amazing, imagery and thoughts about Christmas that are cool have very little to do with, a manger scene. And so, yeah, that's that. We have one more question tonight. Thoughts on Alex Jones? Do you have thoughts about Alex Jones?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I certainly have listened. I think the attraction that I have to even entertaining some of the stuff he talks about is about free speech in general, in a broader sense. I have a tendency to wonder what role they play, whether it's Nick Fuentes or Alex Jones or any other kind of talking head sycophant of the political ring. I wonder about them. I listen to them because I think it's worth noting. I think, again, too, some of the things that he did say, I remember early on in the 20 teens when he was saying some crazy stuff, and then later on they were like, it's true. was interesting, but by no means do I consider him like some sort of kind of pivotal pillar in my worldview. It's just it's interesting.
So I like Alex Jones a lot, and I've recently got bit by the Alex Jones bug. I've been aware of Alex Jones for a really long time. I've listened to Alex Jones off and on, and he is such a buffoon in his presentation that it makes it hard. Over the last 20 years, I've realized, though, he's right a lot. And a lot of the stuff that he says, and he presents it in the most ridiculous and extreme, sometimes laughable way. The root of it is like real things. And I think one of the things early on, I didn't want to listen to a lot of it because it's scary. And I think that, that's not the reasoning that I used at the time, but took me a while to realize that we are being lied to all the time and betrayed all the time by our ruling class, and that a lot of things are really, really ugly, that I think they're so ugly that many of us don't want to open that door. It's one of those things, you can't unsee things. So once you accept something and you look in, you can't not see it. And I think that's where my dad is. I think that's where a lot of people in the boomer generation are. They don't want to reject mainstream media and just kind of the narrative that I think a lot of us have had presented to us most of the time. What I appreciate about Alex Jones, and he's not right all the time, but he's right a lot. He's right about a lot of things that I think people have written him off as a kook on, and it turns out that they're right. He opens the door to a lot of that. I don't like his constant need. So here's the thing. I like that. I am also entertained. I'm entertained by his rants and when he starts losing his mind and going crazy, and he does a lot of that. I think he'd be more effective if he was less of a buffoon. But he is consistent, and he's been fighting for things that he believes are true for a very, very long time against all opposition, and appreciate that. He's also brought a lot of important things to light that I don't think other people, have. I think that if it weren't for him and some of the work that he's done, a lot of people wouldn't be aware of things that many of us are now aware of. He's also fun. So some stuff I don't like, though, to be fair and give a detailed analysis of Alex Jones. He rants on stuff ridiculously, which is kind of obnoxious. He's at the center of a lot of things, but if he's not, he has this need to try to put himself there. Like, I notice, somebody else does something cool. He's like, yeah, we were onto that early on too, but yeah, I digress. Yeah, no, that was really good, but I do cool stuff too. And he does that a lot. He tries to insert himself into things sometimes, which is frustrating. He's way too obsessed with I don't know. I think that he doesn't look at things in terms of right and wrong. He looks at things sometimes in terms of their level of conforming to the founding fathers generation. And I think there's a value to that. I think that's instructive, but I think there's another level of yeah, but those guys weren't perfect either. Is this right or wrong? And I don't think he always looks at that. And he always has a need to so there's better words for this and it's late, but he's so if he's going to criticize Israel, no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Israel. I'm not anti-Israel, but Israel does this. Israel does that. Now, I'm not against this thing, but he apologizes too much instead of just presenting hey, Israel's doing this and this is kind of messed up. But he's willing to say stuff other people aren't. He openly talks about crime statistics no, blacks commit way more violent crime, and it's shocking. Now, I'm not against black people, but I wish he would apologize less and just present things. But I think he struggles with a generational guilt of, people in his age bracket, and I think that's a thing. But overall, like I said, I like Alex Jones. I will admit I listen to his show every single day. But only since October. I just started listening to his show again in October. But I say a very long-winded way of saying I'm an Alex Jones fan. I'm not obsessed, but I do enjoy Alex Jones. Informative and entertaining. What say you? Do you look like you had something to add on that?
Oh, I think that ultimately, when he has those apologetics, it's again, you cannot go but so far before the realization that even though he's criticizing Israel as a modern state, he is a Christian by proclamation, and so therefore he can only go but so far. I think also too, he has kind of low pinged the radar when it comes to that kind of stuff, as opposed to other people who speak very vocally and are proclaimed, as anti-Semitic. And Alex Jones is kind of 50-50. Sometimes he's an anti-Semite, and then other times he's like, he's just a crazy old boomer.
So that's the thing is I think Alex Jones is fundamentally very honest. I don't think he is uncomfortable. I think he is uncomfortable with honest things he discovers. So I think his discomfort comes out when he says things he's not supposed to say but are true. I think he has to couch them in a certain amount of, and we all have those things we're hung up on. I have grown tremendously in my understanding of the world, and at different times in my life I've struggled with having to do that on a lot of things. I get it. Some of his stuff, they're turning the frogs gay, but they were in fact turning the frogs gay. It's a thing. He called 9/11 before it happened when nobody else did, and I'm pretty sure Alex Jones didn't do it. He just saw things lining up a certain way, and he called it. He's on record, and people kind of go back and no, that happened. He's called a lot of things, and he calls it in a ridiculous, silly, takes his shirt off and yells about stuff way. But the substance is often very, very correct. And so, yeah. What I think is going to be maybe our real last question, unless we talk over long and another one sneaks in. So I didn't acknowledge that either. I want to acknowledge that too. Naffenlaust says, a quick thank you to Svan and Matt for holding these weekly meetings. I really appreciate hearing from you both directly at length. Thank you for saying so. I'm glad. I appreciate you saying so. We love doing this. It's something I look forward to all the time, and I really hope that it's valuable to people, and I appreciate you being in the audience and asking questions. And so he is the guy that asked this last question. I say the guy, I don't know. He is the person who asked this last question. Can you please speak to the notion of suicidal empathy in Christianity? Svan, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, it's easy. Christianity, when you hear the Christ bros say, I came not to bring peace but the sword, they always leave out the rest of that verse. And that is suicidal empathy.
The sword to do what, Svan?
Yeah. Oh, well, I pulled it up because I knew we were going to talk about this. And I was like, oh, I got to hit this one. When it comes to, it's in Matthew, and he says, I do not come, do not think I came to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of their own household. For whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves a son or daughter more than me. So if you love your sons and daughters more than Sky Rabbi, you do not deserve his love. This is suicidal empathy is really just a breakdown of the framework of society. And that's what makes Christianity so paradoxical. It was highly bent on destroying the Roman Empire's moral framework of society. And then in turn, it had to very quickly build up its own in order to maintain structure by the time of the rise of the Holy Roman Empire. So it becomes paradoxical. But I love to bring that up because that is suicidal empathy. The idea is you will love someone, a stranger who loves Christ, more than you will love your father or mother who either does not know him or rejects him outright. Those bonds of birth, those bonds of guidance, those bonds of protection mean nothing. And I think this was ultimately like the downfall. What was that tubby bastard who ran? He ran the Trad Workers Party.
Heimbach.
The pack of sausages neck. That guy and a lot of the guys that followed him, I argued with them a lot online, but his downfall, the one thing that really, brought his flabulousness down was when he said, I share more with a Christian from Africa than I do with a European who is a pagan. That is suicidal empathy. That's the more blatant version of it.
Flag on the play. I don't like the term because I don't think the term's accurate. I don't think it's based on empathy. It's not based on putting yourself in the other person's place and then relating your feeling to them. It is a humiliation ritual because the only way you are acceptable to their God is through completely debasing yourself. And that's kind of one of the biggest and most important themes to this. And it goes to what is commonly talked about as suicidal empathy, but I don't think it's just that. Because it's not, you should love everybody. It is, you should love everybody, but you should love your enemy. And that's a different thing. That's not empathy. That's groveling. That's gross. A general love for all of humanity may or may not be a good thing. A particular love for your enemy and refusal to respond in kind when you are mistreated is a different kind of thing. It's not empathy when we see this race. And we saw this really recently publicly with Charlie Kirk's murder. His widow racing to see how fast she can apologize the man who killed her husband and the father of her children. It's gross. Like, my wife and I appreciate that I found a good woman who agrees with me on this. It is disgusting when we watch the parents of murdered or abused children race to forgive the person who killed or abused their children, or to see people's family rush to forgive the murderer of their kin. That's not empathy. There's no empathy to that. That is just self-diminishment, and let's deny our most basic instincts to elevate the very worst amongst us. And some of it goes to the very root of that theology. And this is a big part of why I left Christianity. The disgusting level of like jealousy and vanity of their God. One of the biggest themes of Christianity is that there is one man is not saved by works, but by faith. The idea that, and specifically that none should boast. This idea that The only thing that saves you is you believing in Jesus and giving yourself up to God and his prince, Jesus.
What is the term? There is no Jew, there is no Gentile, there is no slave, there is no free man. They are all united in Christ. It's like,
Well,
that's
yeah, he is the way, the truth, and the light, and there's no way but to the Father but through him. The only thing that qualifies you is Jesus. And they forgive you of every slight you do to another human, because the only thing that matters is that you submit to their God. He can't stomach a mortal taking any kind of pride in any level of accomplishment. That's gross and disgusting. And the biggest thing that pointed that out to me was all of the nomenclature of him as Heavenly Father, as a father figure. I could not imagine if my daughter came in here super proud of a picture that she drew or a thing that she made, and me being so offended that I needed to take credit for it. Like, how dare you be proud of something you did? And I'm just some dude. I'm not the God of the universe. That's disgusting. And I don't think that I don't think that it's about empathy. This equality of people isn't because you're so empathetic to the migrant or empathetic to the criminal. It's you're taught to forgive the unforgivable as a way of you submitting to all people are worthless before Yahweh. And that's terrible. It's terrible to us. It's terrible to them, whoever them might be. But it is a constant act of humiliating yourself before your foes. And we see that with the Pope, washing everybody's feet all the time and stuff. There are these rituals where you are celebrating people that are not worthy of celebration. And I think that, and specifically when you pair it with the Sermon on the Mount, it's not about empathy. It's a deliberate assault on the heroic in order to level the playing field. It is anti-success and pro-losers, so that we are all unified in worthlessness before their God. And that is antithetical to everything I believe. And one of the reasons that I'm here and not there, probably the biggest reason I'm here and not there, is the realization of, whoa, this is wrong. I don't know what's right yet, but this is wrong. And if this is all there is, I want to be on the other side. And that that freed me to come back home to Asatru and back home to what's natural and makes sense. Empathy is wonderful. Empathy, being able to feel what someone else is feeling and approach other beings from a point of understanding that way, is beautiful. Humiliating yourself in front of your foes is a very different thing. I can empathize with a lot of people who are on the other team. It doesn't mean I'm giving them my stuff. It means like, hey, I get you. I see where you're coming from, but you stay over there on that side of that line or we're going to have problems. Like, that's empathetic, but that's not what's being taught. That's not what that religion is taught. And then sure enough, we did, I specifically flapped my gums a lot on that. So we got the next question. If you still have time, and I'm joking about all of that. I've got all night. We got as much time to answer any questions you guys have. We love doing this. I look forward to this all week. If you still have time, thank you for sharing. Those were great thoughts to hear. Another thought that is on my mind a lot is that Christianity has been the spiritual path of my ancestors for the last 800 to 900 years. And the end result is that we are dying as a people. Do you have any thoughts on that? We have infinite thoughts on that.
Well, and you kind of
where would you like to start with some of your thoughts on that?
You were kind of heading in a direction when we talked about becoming free, coming home. I think that is the end result. Just as we had talked in the culmination of all the things that we talked about, perhaps the political unification of the church allowed Europe to better defend itself against the incursion of an external threat, an alien threat, even though that which they used to unify themselves was alien as well. We are coming to the point now where our people must survive. And what that really comes down to is they must come home. And those two are parallel, they're analogous to each other. So it is important that everyone here say, I know that a lot of folks don't want to say, we don't proselytize, we don't do this, we don't do that. No, it is about telling people, look at the folly of this, look at the fallacy of this, look at what it's doing wrong, and look at the people who have to drastically change what is clearly written in the book in order to substantiate correct thought. A lot of these Christ bros, these Christian nationalists, these semi or fully religious fascistic folks, they are clearly going against what is written. The cognitive dissonance is so loud in the room that I think it's imperative that we just simply speak the truth. You don't need this book. You don't need this text. You don't need this rabbinical law. You don't need this covenant. What you need to do is come home. And you need to live a religion in the now instead of constantly slipping and sliding on your belly in preparation for the punishment of a foreign god upon your soul. So I think that unification, coming home, and blatantly showing people with honesty and sincerity, this does not say what it truly takes. This does not have the spirit of what people need in order to thrive anymore.
Yeah, so the way the question is posited, we've spent 1,000 years under this veil of outwardly, where this Christianity, it has built within us a deep self-loathing and, as the Bible says, a house divided against itself can't stand. It is intentionally meant to sow that kind of division, to bring us all to our knees. Internally, we have been made to feel guilty for the things that we know are true and right and just, and to try to force ourselves into something that isn't. And the extent that Europe has been glorious in that is us acting contrary to the teachings of Christ. And then we have this guilt complex that, we got to do these things, but then we've got to reconcile it with something that's irreconcilable. The freeing feeling, the liberation of just stop pretending and be real lets you, and this is, I don't know that this addresses the question in the way that you asked it, but I do think that it is my answer and is meaningful to it. You don't convert to Asatru. You revert to Asatru. When you cast off the foreign shackles, you return to your natural state of being. All of a sudden, you don't have to feel guilty for all of the noble inclinations of your soul. You don't have to feel guilty for the noble inclinations of your sex. You don't have to feel guilty for prioritizing family and people and race above humanity. You don't have to do that. You can be proud. You can be proud of who you are as an individual. You can be proud of who you are as a race. You can be proud of your family. You can be proud of your accomplishments. And you can do great things in order to achieve fame and success and not feel bad about that. You can live boldly without giving yourself a complex. There's a beauty in being able to come home to what's natural and to stop the mental gymnastics. And that's why we describe, it's long standing and long before I became the Alzheimer Gothi, kind of the AFA slogan is about roots, it's about connections, it's about coming home. You come home to Asatru. This is what your soul was designed to be in relation to the gods that designed that very soul. And it's sad to think of the 1,000 years that we lost and that we could have done so much better in and been so much further ahead in. But we don't need to cast off all of the progress that we've made as a people. We need to reintegrate that with the spirituality that was left off way back when and nurture our soul to keep up with our technological progress and to meet us where we are and lead us into the future. And we need to learn the lessons of the past that allowed us to be brought under the yoke of Christianity and be resolved not to repeat those, to fix the things that were broken. We talked about it earlier in this broadcast. We should have been unified under Asatru, and we weren't. Let's fix that and be unified. We should have had the infrastructure as a faith that we lacked, that Christianity in the early papal administration had. Let's build that. We should have had the strength of writing and communication and codifying our beliefs and having that system in place. It wasn't in place when we needed it. Let's build it and make sure it's in place now. Let's learn those lessons. We owe that to our ancestors. Another quick question. I'm a member and trying to figure out how to start with worship. What's something simple that you would recommend doing on a weekly basis? Svan.
Okay. I have actually recently been talking to my son. He's past his man making, and he is tackling the spiritual for young men. I think that's something. The world is bigger than them, but they are so dependent kind of on the material and the physicality of the world that it's kind of hard to broach. So I told him something very simple. I said, if you get a bowl and you get a cup, if you fill the cup up and you drink from it, that cup becomes you. And if you pour that into the bowl, that bowl being the gods, there is a deed of transference of physical substance between you to the deed and the divine around you. And that is symbolic in that. So if you take that cup and you gift over to the gods through the bowl, you are physically making this transfer. And then I suggested to him that he come with 3 things after he sips and pours, that he comes with a statement, with a question, and with an observation. And so, not necessarily in this order, but the idea of the statement being simple as, I give this to you to better understand or to take away my ignorance of everything around me. And then to ask, when I go forth from here, what must I do to be better in your eyes? And third, and lastly, as an observation is more or less, I will continue to do this, or I intend to do this, or I am doing this to return home. It's a blanket statement that tells yourself why you're there. And then at the same time, the other two are pointed towards the external, or that which is outside of you, which is the divine reflection in that which is the physical world. That might be overly complicated, but you could take something from that. I think ultimately, though, once per week, taking something physical and transferring it to a bowl and having a sincere moment with the divine or with your ancestry in that act of transference, that nexus point of the gifting, where something comes from you and is no longer a part of you but given unto them, is a repeated act that I think leads us, sets up the guideposts, so that when we go from that place and we live our lives, we gain great wisdom from it. And it's like kind of constantly regrounding yourself. It's the watering of your roots. It's the continual action of gifting. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't get into analysis paralysis. It can be water. It can be milk. It can be wine. It could be dependent greatly upon how you feel. And in your mind, you should understand that it could change in the future as you grow more accustomed to being culturally inundated in Asatru. Your expressions may change. But right now, the very basic, at the very beginning, is about doing a deed of transference and gifting with your sincere intention placed upon the table outside of yourself. I think a lot of people either don't do that, or they are so inundated by Christian thought that they internalize prayer. They speak about perhaps themselves, or the only third position that they attack or talk about is via a book. No, what I'm ultimately getting at is these questions, these statements, and these observations help move your soul and your mind away from yourself and towards the deed of making connection and relationship with the gods. They may show up in your life in ways that are more intimate to you. I'm very weary when I meet people that are like, I had a dream about the gods, and he had a big giant helmet, and he had like wolf underwear and a big double-headed axe. It was awesome. Because I feel like they're kind of padding perhaps some fake framework. But when they sincerely reach out and they know that someone in the room in a dream who's telling them something of great importance is not them, is not their ancestors, it is the divine reaching out to them and telling them a path to take. That is the start of kind of really beginning to understand this is a living religion. It's not about placating a divine form to get out of trouble at the end of school. No, it's about physically giving up yourself, stepping outside of yourself to have a relationship with the gods that can show you ways in the world towards better things, towards a better self, towards a better community, all of that. And it all starts with, again, that gifting cycle.
All of that. So, as opposed to suicidal empathy, I think empathy becomes something we should think about in terms of our relationship with the divine. Um, so, we should think that the very least the gods are is the very best imaginable version of people that we can come up with. They are much better than that, but that's a place for us to start. So the gods, and I believe this fully, whatever you do in your worship should be from the heart in the best way that you know how to express that. And when I say this, some people that like to script their bloats or like to compose a poem or plan what they're going to say, if that is authentic to them and that's the way that they are able to best present themselves authentically to the gods, I don't fault that. I am much more comfortable just speaking from the heart because I get lost in trying to memorize something or trying to do a complex sequence of things. But the gods see through all of our pretension or all of our nonsense. You cannot fool the gods with whatever way you want to present yourself. The gods know who you are, at least as much as they care to. So any pretense before them is just insulting. Maybe at best it's comical and they chuckle, but you're not fooling anybody. So rather than say things you don't mean or being grandiose, I think you're much better served to start out simply. And I look at it this way, and it sounds cheesy, and I don't mean it that way. But it's like when a child says something nice to you or gives you some stick figure drawing that they drew. You don't need stick figure drawings that look terrible, but it's the effort that they thought you would like this thing and that they gave it to you. And that's beautiful and touching. The gods don't need anything from you. The effort and the thought of you giving them something means something to them and is meaningful. So I would keep it simple and I would be very honest. Don't claim that you have some devotion you don't have. Don't claim that you're anything more or anything less than you are. But be open-hearted and open-minded. And if you've never interacted with the gods before, it's very easy to go in with a mindset of skepticism or whatever. And a little bit of that, depending on where you come from, makes sense. But I challenge you to open yourself, open your mind, open your heart. Best things that I ever did was when I first came home to Asatru, and I didn't know anything, and I wanted to start somewhere with my worship practice. I would set up an altar, and I remember exactly where it was. It was at my mom's house for whatever reason. I think she was out of town because I was an adult by then, but I was at my mom's house, and I set up an altar space on top of a dresser. And I didn't have, statues of the gods or anything fancy. I had a candle. And I made, I resolved to do like a week with a number of our gods. And I forget how many or just all of which ones. But a certain number of them, a week at a time, I was going to read the lore that was available about them, and then go before the altar, light a candle, make an offering. And it was very simple. And the one that I remember, and I think with all of them, it was, some kind of, like I'd pour them a shot and then I would take a shot and we would share a drink and just say, hey, sometimes I think with a stick of incense also. And, I will always remember I think the Odin one was well received, but the offering I made to Freya, I really felt powerfully like she received, and like that went well. And it was so just silly and, whatever, but it was well intentioned. I knew that gold was special to Freya and that she had two cats that pulled her chariot. And this would have been way cuter if I was like 7, but I wasn't. I was like 20 or something. But I got some fancy feast because she had some cats and it was fancy. And I opened it up and I had a shot glass of Goldschlager. And I took a shot and I poured her a shot and just said, hey, I'm here. I'm trying to come home. I'm reaching out. I would like to build a relationship with you, and I'm here and I'm listening. And I sat there and, did some meditation in front of the altar and kind of absorbed things and collected myself. And from such a small and, I don't know, insignificant offering, I feel like I was very, very blessed. And I feel like that doing that, not just to her, but to many of our gods at that time, really opened all of this and opened my heart up to letting the Aesir in. And that brought me to where I am today. And I don't remember all of the gods that I made offerings to or just how that all worked in order. I made it to many, but I don't want to misspeak. But I know that specifically I did this with Thor and with Odin and with Freya, with Bragi. And I believe that I did it with many others, but that's the ones that I remember. Oh, and with Tyr, very specifically, and with Freyr. And I invited them in, and it is simple and it's not a lot, but it meant a lot in my development in my life. And I think that it initiated my participation in that gift cycle. Our gods have given us, consciousness and goodly hue and all of the things that make up our soul and make up our existence. So they put the gift cycle into motion. It's on us to reciprocate our end. And then it keeps going. And so I think that started that cycle going in my life. And it's led me here in a really beautiful way. And so I would suggest doing something simple and similar to that. But yeah, that'd be my suggestion. Appreciate you guys being here this evening. I will figure out what the game plan is for next week between now and then. Next time I get together with Svan here, we will finish out the Poetic Edda. The plan is to go, and I know that all of these poems at the end about the Volsung saga, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's little fragments, and a lot of you guys are looking for the higher mythology stuff. And I think we'll hit that pretty quick when we go into the Prose Edda. And I'm very excited to get in the Gylfaginning because that is such a foundational text. That poem, if there's only one you can read, that one tells you about what Asatru is. So I'm excited to go through this with you guys. I appreciate y'all. So Yule, I will see you guys during Yule, but Yule is going to start here before I see y'all next. So stuff to kind of be on your radar. Tomorrow is the very first day of remembrance of King Siward, one of the kings of Essex that brought our faith back to our folk for a time there with his brother and fought against that tide. We celebrate him for the first time tomorrow, so please join us in doing that. Coming up on Saturday will be Mother's Night and the start of Yule. Celebrate Yule. celebrate Yule with other Asatru, celebrate with your family. If it's just you at your altar, it's not just you at your altar. It's you with your gods and your ancestors. Bring them in and celebrate Yule this season. It's going to be awesome. I look forward to seeing you this time next week, if you can make it to a Hof. So here's the other thing. I gotta reduce my calendar here. Nothing loust, who is in fact a male, they assure us in the chat on the side. I don't know where you're at. If you're close to a Hof, each and every one of our Hofs are celebrating Yule this Saturday. If you can make it there, you should. Anyone listening to this, if you can make it to your Hof here in the next couple of days on Saturday, be there and celebrate with your folk. It's a special time. It's, arguably the most special time in the year to do that. So take advantage of it. But yeah, I wish you guys the very best of Yules. I will see you a week from now. Until then, hail the folk, hail the AFA, hail the Aesir. Remember, victory never sleeps.